I'm sorry, I'm good, Everett. Thank you.
Good. Yeah, we got, I see Dr. Bishop is on with us. Brandon and Shane. What's going on? Mateo, Rockstar. How you doing? Could you guys unmute yourselves? What's going on, Mateo? Ryder, Joshua. Isaiah, what's up?
Morning, Mr. Everett.
Good. How you doing, man?
Good morning.
Good.
Good. You back on the saddle?
Yeah.
Okay. Good. Freeman Blade, what's up? I haven't seen this guy in 50 years, Freeman Blade. Akil, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Good. D Nice, what's up? Darius, check in.
Hey, Mr. Everett.
How you doing?
Good. And you?
Good. Bobby Alvarez, he there. What's going on? October, see you made it. Malachi.
Good morning, y'all.
What's up, Quentin?
Good morning.
Oh, snap. Is that a Toba Thomas? What's happening?
How you doing?
You know, I had kids hitting me up asking, like, where's Toba? Is he in trouble?
I'm back. Just got back from Mexico, back in the LB. Man, I see a lot of beautiful new faces today. New faces in the house. Honestly.
Yeah, I want to, before you get started, October, introduce a couple guests that we have. We have Desiree Powell, who is the athletic director for the Cleveland Metropolitan School District. You want
to? Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, I should say.
Yes. Now, is Nikita? Is she on the line? Nikita, did she join us?
No, Nikita's not there.
Oh, okay. And then we have. So we're gonna be doing some work with Miss Powell and her kids in Cleveland. I see that Freeman Blade on the line. Freeman is a former Twinsburg high great who went on to play college ball. I haven't seen Freeman in 40 years probably. So this is amazing. This is great. And Freeman is connected us actually to Miss Powell. Scott Embacher is the principal for St. Francis School there in Cleveland. Scott's on the line. You want to wave to the guys?
What's up, guys? Sorry I'm not on my video. I'm driving. It'll be a little awkward.
Okay. Well, stronger together. That's what we're about. So we know that. And I don't know if Jonathan White is on the call. Did you see Jonathan White at all, Daniel? He's the director of youth basketball for the Cavaliers, the Cleveland Cavaliers. Okay, so maybe he's not.
Yeah, I don't see a Jonathan White on the call right now.
Okay, so October, it's all yours.
Excellent. So who wants to lead us in? First of all, good morning, Kings. How y'all doing? Good morning. Let me get some.
I'm doing good.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Doing good.
Morning. Who wants to volunteer and lead us in a breathing exercise? We're gonna step up.
Matty Ice.
Jordan, you got us? London, what's going on?
I got it.
Yeah?
Okay.
Yeah.
Make sure everybody's set up right.
All right. Everybody sit back in the chair. Sit up straight. Okay, ready? Breathe in. Breathe out. Breathe in. Breathe out. Breathe in. Breathe out. Everyone relaxed? You ready? Okay.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you. And you know what we do, y'all. Let's go around. I want everyone to name 3 things they're grateful for in this present moment. It can be family members, loved ones, opportunities that have come, just looking outside for another day. I want everyone to go around. You can go popcorn style, just naming 3 things, calling into action, 3 things that we're grateful for.
I'll go first. First off, I'm Solace. I'm volunteering with you guys right now. I'm grateful for this opportunity. My family's in good health despite how things are going right now in the nation. And then also I'm grateful that the leaves are changing. I'm on the East Coast and it's really pretty because everything's like orange and yellow right now.
Good. And I apologize, I didn't introduce Solace, but Solace she's a sophomore lacrosse player at my alma mater, Oberlin, and so she's going to be helping us out for a while.
You said lacrosse?
Lacrosse, yes.
Okay, lax player. I played like 2 years back in the day. I see you. Welcome. Let's go, gentlemen.
I'm grateful for the boss program, waking up today, and my mom.
Sir.
I'm thankful for having good health, my family, and good grades.
I'm thankful for waking up, having a roof over my head, and being able to eat every night.
What's up, Mark? How you doing? Good to see you.
Hello.
I'm thankful for God waking me up this morning. I'm thankful for my family, and I'm thankful for being a part of the boss program.
See you, CP Isaiah.
What you thankful for, October?
Man, I'm just grateful to be surrounded by such a nurturing and loving village, whether it's my family, a boss, my mentors, family members, even the youth who inspire me every day. I'm just grateful for the people around me. You know, y'all are a reflection of who I am, and I try to make y'all proud with everything I do every day. Yeah. Ryder, what's going on? What you grateful for? Y'all like them brand new. What's going on?
I'm thankful for boss, good grades, and my family.
All right. What's going on, Ryder?
Nothing. How about you guys?
Good.
Let's start calling people out then. Caleb, what you grateful for? Marcus, Malachi. Let's make sure everyone's cameras are on, gentlemen. You know the deal.
I'm thankful for the boss program, having good grades, and for football coming back.
Okay.
That you are.
How's the Orange Blue working out, man?
It's going good. We haven't been able to like throw the football or catch the ball because of that's not sanitary. But I think next week we're gonna be able to do that because so far we've been doing good with all
your protocols and everything. You froze up on me.
Yeah.
It's all good. Someone else want to jump in? What we grateful for this morning, y'all?
Caleb had to step away real quick. He'll be right back.
Okay.
Okay. So what you grateful for, Mr. Tate?
I'm grateful for being able to still play football to this day, and I'm grateful for even having a school year and still being able to go outside and have fun.
You look polished, man.
Yeah. Nah, but I'm playing with the pilots right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now who are the pilots?
Wilmington Pilots.
Oh, okay. But you at Poly.
You said what?
You're at Poly though.
Yeah, I'm at Poly.
check. Okay, but once they start up, that's what I'm saying. You get the look, man. The neck, the shirt, the stuff.
Oh, what's going on, Rashid? Chauncey, what's going on? Y'all wake up. What you grateful for? Is that a beard on gospel? Oh, man, bro, full beard. I know that's not everybody, y'all. Feel free, guests, to share. What are y'all grateful for this morning?
Can I go?
Absolutely.
I'm grateful for waking up this morning, being with my family and with the boss program.
What's up, Jay? You get your audio off. You turned it right off. How you doing?
Sorry, I'm good.
Good. Now, and where's Rosie Greer at? Can you highlight Rosie Greer, Daniel?
I'm thankful for having a back over my head.
Okay. Marcus, what's up? Andrew Johnson. Where's Andrew Johnson? Or Roosevelt Greer? Daniel, can you highlight Roosevelt Greer?
I'm looking for him right now.
I'm here.
Yeah, Roosevelt Greer is one of our newest members of BOSS. And for those of you old guys like me, you might remember his grandfather, Roosevelt Greer.
Played for the Rams.
That's right, the Fierce Enforcement with Deacon Jones and Merlin
That's
Olsen.
That's right. That's right.
We got some protection now.
Wow. Wow. Hey, what about Pamela Greer? Yeah, man. Yeah. She was just as famous.
Yeah.
So
I think there's no relation though.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
Oh, man.
A quick side note. I know the original Boss theme song, is All I Do Is Win by DJ Khaled. But I'm thinking, when we start off this mornings, it would be nice to start off with, some music, some nice energizing theme song. I want everybody, all the kids, to drop in a song that y'all want us to lead in these meetings with. It got to be motivating, it got to exemplify the qualities of Boss. But yeah, if you can go ahead and just drop in the group chat a song that you would recommend for us to lead in with. The standard is kind of like All I Do Is Win, right, Everett? That's the original song.
Yeah, that's it, no matter what.
All I do is want to get the energy up. So yeah, go ahead in the group chat, drop some song recommendations, and we're gonna start leading in the mornings with it while y'all waiting while we're trying to get everybody on the call.
Yeah, Donovan Pitts, what's up, man? I see you on there. Ken and Nine, what you grateful for?
Hey, what's going on? I'm thankful for basketball games starting to happen again, at least for AAU. Thankful for another month, another week. Yeah.
I'll go. I'm thankful for God, the boss program, and I've been able to maintain above a 3.8.
All right, way to go.
Our work.
I'm thankful for God, family, and friends.
Good. Was that Makai?
Yeah.
Oh wow, your voice is changing too, man.
Growing.
This we got to get over this pandemic, man. We ain't seen these guys. You come back and Boogie sound like Barry White. Hey, Boogie said, "Baby, baby, baby." This is great. This is great. But guys, we in for a treat today. Now I don't know. Has Monica Ochoa, has she joined us? from the Munzer Foundation. Monica, are you with us?
I'm here. I'm here.
Okay, good. Well, we want to introduce you to there's a group of our guys. Monica is the program assistant at the Munzer Foundation. And without the support of the Munzer Foundation, we wouldn't be here today. They've been a great support of us from the very beginning. And then we thank them. And you can see here just some of the fruit that is growing in our garden. Yes, I don't know if you want to say anything.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for having me, and I really appreciate being a part of this. And that's what I'm thankful for. I'm thankful for that I have a job where I get to visit and support profits, and Boss is definitely one of them. So thank you for allowing me into your space, and keep up the good work. I mean, I hear, in your voices, I can see the excitement and the support and the community around Boss. So, Everett, you're doing all the right things. So thank you for allowing me into your space today.
We look forward, and we'll at 11 o'clock, we'll break out, you, I, and Marcia, to have a conversation. Okay.
Okay. Yes.
Good. And yeah, so like I said, we are going to be treated to an amazing conversation today. I don't know if Shawn is on the call just yet, but Shawn Rochester is one of our newest friends of Boss. A buddy had actually sent me a video or a link to a video when Shawn was making a presentation at Google. And I was so impressed by what he had to say. And actually, he reminded me so much of my dear, dear friend, my mentor, and the best man in my wedding and everything. A guy named Al Wellington, who unfortunately we lost about 10 years ago. But his whole approach, his whole mannerism, Boss just was exuding all over him. When I met him, well, I didn't know him, but I reached out to him and we've become fast friends. And what he was talking about, I thought was important for you guys to hear, because as Dr. Bishop says over and over and over and over again, reinforced by what Bobby Franklin says over and over and over again, and what I say over and over again. The whole goal of this deal is to move you from wherever you are to great, right? Because good is not good enough. And but even if we move you to great, the reality of life is that there are people who, just because of the color of your skin, will not think the same thing about you that they may think about someone else, just based on the color of your skin. They call it implicit bias, and it manifests itself all over. And if you don't know it, if you don't understand that it exists, if you don't recognize it, because again, as Dr. Bishop has said over and over and over again, one of the things we believe in is the set of the sail, right? So if something happened, what you gonna do about it, right? So we need to understand that this implicit bias against you exists, but it's not an excuse. But we just want to know that it exists and how we're gonna get around it. He has actually quantified it in terms of dollars and cents, which makes the case that everybody pays the price for this implicit bias, not just Black people, white folk, society pays the price. But I'll let him share it. And I don't know if he's on here, but I know Dr. Bishop, you've been researching Dr. Rochester, who is a chemical engineer by profession, but he then also went and got his MBA from the University of Chicago. And he's worked on Wall Street, corporate America, so he qualifies. That's another thing we talk about. What evidence do you have that you should be listening to someone, right? Well, he's got evidence that we should be listening, and then after you hear him, I think you'll agree. But I don't know if you want to say a few words for Dr. Bishop before we welcome Shawn to the show.
Well, first of all, let me welcome all of our visitors. I was just sitting here ever thinking about how folks are on this call more than just to be entertained. They're here possibly because they either working with young folks like yourself or even older folks. And I thought about what scriptures say, the finding is for the searchers. And so I take my hat off to all our visitors who's here, who's searching for some kind of solution for our people, our community. And let me say, you're in the right place at the right time, because let me tell you, something is going on here. Anytime you can touch young folks and go beyond just the regular to touch that higher reaches of individual, which is helping them to find their purpose and their voice, then I say that you're now becoming part of the solution, because everyone on this call have greatness inside of them. The question is, how do I manifest it? And that's why we come week after week, because we know this, Everett, that the only thing that separates the great from the average is information and how to utilize that information. So we're here once again, and I hope everyone here has pencil and paper, because you can't just rely on your mind to remember all of this, because the kind of information that we're about to receive today, like the information we received in the past, is life-changing. And that's why we're here. We're creating and help to empower folks to become game changers. Our whole motto is this: first find your purpose, then turn around and help somebody else find theirs. So welcome. Bob.
It's John. Well, Bobby, you want to weigh in?
Well, when you talk about being thankful, I'm thankful for the Lord waking me up this morning and allowing me to have a platform in which I can have an opportunity to pay forward the information and the struggles that I went through in order to make some of these young guys, or maybe all of these young guys, journey a little bit easier. The things that we're going to hear today from Shawn is things that I didn't have the opportunity of hearing or knowing or understanding until I got into the journey and the process of transgressing through corporate America. So I think what we're going to hear today, I listened to is 1 hour presentation to Google, and I was just fascinated. And I hope all the young men today, after they have an opportunity to hear Shawn, that the basis of the information that he's going to give you is more valuable than you can ever think, because it's something that you won't ever be able to escape. And I've tried to express that in my conversations with you before, is that you can change and do almost anything except for one thing. You can't change the color of your skin.
That's right.
And everyone that you encounter is not going to like you. But if you are outstanding in what professional endeavor you choose to be, they will respect you. And that's what you get, you strive to get. And that's my 2 cents for today.
Great job.
Now, is Shawn checked in, Daniel? Do we know if Shawn is with us yet? Shawn Rochester?
Yeah, Shawn is with us.
Okay. Well,
I'm here.
Okay, so unless anybody has Daniel or anybody else has anything to be grateful for, then we can turn it over to Shawn and let him do his thing.
Yeah, I would just say that we have a really impactful speaker here today. I watched his talk that he gave, and also I've actually started reading the book, and just through conversations with friends. We're really excited to have Shawn on to talk about economics in the Black community, the total sum of the Black tax ever since slavery till now. It's really impactful. It mentions in the book getting your PhD, which stands for Purchase Black, Hire Black People, and Deposit Money into Black banks. Really good, just some really good stuff. So I can just turn it over to Shawn.
Yeah, now, and then one note that we've ordered a copy of Shawn's book for everyone on this call. So if you just capture the names, Daniel, then we'll get a copy of the book to everybody who's with us today. All right, Shawn Rochester. You put a tie and everything on.
I gotta come correct for these future leaders.
Right, that's
I
right.
gotta come correct for these future leaders, right? So I'm really excited. I think we're gonna have a great conversation. Part of what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna do a talk that's gonna really cover like how did we get to this point, right? And I'm going to introduce, the PhD economic framework. And then after the talk, we can just engage in robust conversation. So any questions that you guys have on anything that was said or anything was in the book, or just questions that you have in general, we can kind of dive in and talk about. I just, encourage free flow, right, of information. It's a safe space. I think you guys will really like it. So I'm going to switch over and see if I can share my screen. Because as I kind of go through the talk, I'm going to take you guys through some PowerPoint presentations. I think it'll be powerful and profound by design, and I'm looking forward to your feedback. So if you bear with me, let me see if I can share screen here. All right, 1 second. Here we go. Hopefully you guys can all see that. So as was said, my name is Shawn Rochester, and I wrote a book called The Black Tax, The Cost of Being Black in America. And in that book, I take a look at the financial cost of discrimination against Black people. Normally when people talk about discrimination, they tend to speak about it from the perspective of the injustice or the immorality associated with it. I wanted to look at it from the perspective of what is the cost? And more importantly, what does research from the finest institutions in the country say that cost is? So the book is broken into 3 parts. In the first part, I take a look at the financial cost of discrimination in the present day, like right now, in markets and areas that are really critical for wealth accumulation in the Black community. So that's the housing space, it's the automotive space, it's the insurance and financing behind that. It is the job search, it's high-end careers, it's online commerce, it's capital raising for business, so on and so forth. In the second part of the book, I do a look back from the time of slavery and kind of walk forward up into the present and really just go through a bunch of discriminatory practices that you guys may have heard of, but I look at it in terms of the economics, right? What was the cost? In the third part of the book, I take a look at kind of where are we right now economically. I introduce this framework, this economic framework called PhD, which stands for purchase, hire, and deposit in ways that create jobs, create and expand business, and provide capital, money, right, in the Black community. Why is that really important? Because, pre-COVID, we were missing about 6 million jobs across the broader Black community. And we were also missing 1.4 million businesses with employees. You may know that there are about 2.5 million, 6 million Black businesses. Unfortunately, of that total number, only about 4% of those have any employees, right? That 4% represents about 109,000 businesses. That 4% generates 70% of all the revenue from Black business, about $100 billion, and employs about 1 million people. And while we have 109,000 of those businesses, we're missing 1.4 million, right? And that, of course, is driving the gap in capital or net worth that we have in our families and our communities, which is in the many, many trillions of dollars. So what we're talking about are really, really large problems, right? And as the case where you have really large challenges and problems, it's important to get a lot of people together to be able to work on those problems, right? Much like we have now with so many people on the call. But here's the challenge when it comes to effective problem solving. It's really tough to work with folks on solving a problem if A, they don't see the problem, or B, if they think you're the problem, right? So if you would just fix you, then we would be great. And I'll share a couple of platitudes with you that you may have heard. One of those are that Black folks are just simply not trying hard enough. That really has more to do with not getting ahead than any type of racial discrimination. You've got over 6 in 10 Americans that believe that. Or you may have heard that Black folks have the same chance as anybody else to get ahead in America, right? Over 6 in 10 Americans believe that as well. Or you might have heard that racism is an excuse for failure. The problem is mine. And instead of me taking responsibilities from my actions or inactions, I spend all my time blaming everybody else, right? About 7 in 10 Americans believe that. The challenge is if that's the background thinking, right, then that thinking is going to show up in the policies and the plans and the programs that are designed to actually solve issues that affect our. Now, one of the things that's really important for us to understand is to be able to really effectively solve problems, you got to have 2 important things at the foundation, at the basis. One is empathy, just your ability to put yourself in somebody else's shoes, to see things from their perspective and to understand how they got there, right? Which we call the pathology. And the other piece of it is understanding. And that's how we use data and information to make the world a better place for ourselves and for our fellow man, right? Now, I want to share a quote with you. And this is from Albert Einstein. He gave this quote to the National Urban League back in 1946. And he said that we must make every effort to ensure that the past injustice, violence, and economic discrimination, which by definition is this Black tax that I'm talking about, will be made known to the people. The taboo, let's not talk about it, must be broken, right? So taking advice from Mr. Einstein, let's talk about it. So in the time that I have with you this morning, going into afternoon, what I'm going to talk about is how is it that after about 400 years, more than 40 million Black people in America own just about 2% of US wealth. Like, how is that even possible, right? Either we are consistently and colossally inept, right? Or there is something else going on in the environment that we need to take a much closer look at. So that's what I'm going to do. Let's take a look at what's going on in the environment. So one of the first things I want us to do is I want to go back to like the time of slavery. I'm not going to discuss the horrors of that institution. There's many books written on that, but I do want to look at it from an economic perspective, right? Now, the first thing I need us all to understand that slavery by definition is a 100% tax on your labor. It means nothing that you produce is yours, right? As a matter of fact, not even you are yours. And there's many things from this period of time that we could never put a price on, right? That we could never value. We could never value what it is to be a woman and to be unable to control your body for the entirety of your life. We could never value what it is to be a man and to be unable to protect your loved ones, right? Your wife or mom or daughter, so on and so forth, right? But there are things that you can value. And one of those things is the labor extracted from millions of people over almost a 250-year period, right? And economists have taken a look at that. Some place the value of that labor extracted from 1619 to 1865 as high as 24 trillion. Others place the number as high as 97 trillion. If we assume that the truth is somewhere in the middle, you can say it's as high as $50 trillion. Labor extracted from millions of people for almost a 250-year period. That number is massive and it may be new to you, but that's not the only thing that we can value, right, from that time. If you go back to 1860, you've got almost 4 million people held in bondage, right? They represent 50% of the full economic value of the South. They are the most liquid asset in the country, and they are traded, bought and sold on open markets. So there are prices for these people, right? There's a price if you're old or young, male, female, able-bodied, or lame. So it turns out that the value of these folks is so large, it's so significant that you have to put it in terms of national wealth or national income, right? So economists put the value in terms of US wealth between 16 and 20% of US wealth, or 1 to 2 years of GDP, which is just a fancy way of saying the national income, right? So if you look at it from a wealth perspective, it's about $15.5 trillion. US wealth in 2016 was about 85 trillion. 16 to 20% of that is 14 to 17 trillion. If you take an average of those two, you're at 15.5. If you look at it from an income perspective, it's about $28.5 trillion. National income is roughly, this is pre-COVID, about 19 trillion a year, right? So 1 to 2 years is 19 to 38 trillion. If you take an average of those, you're at 28.5. That's two different ways to come up with the value of what those people are worth in today's dollars. If you take an average of those two, we're at 22 trillion, right? If you go back to 1839, Henry Clay in the US Senate is putting a value on people held in bondage at that time. And he places that value at $1.2 billion at that time, right? Slave-related returns from investments in slavery is 6 to 8% per year. If we take something that's even lower than that at 5.5, and you put that in today's dollars, it'll be over $24 trillion. If you go back to the 1810s, you have Thomas Jefferson, we are all familiar with, and James Madison, and they placed the value of Black people held in bondage at their time at roughly 1 year of national income, or GDP. That would be the equivalent of $19 trillion today, or they say it would require the sale of 1/3 of all public lands. The point here is that the value of these folks with respect to the country is enormous and massive and really, hard to conceive. Now, if you think about slavery, we're talking about, as high as $50 trillion. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the economic implication of this, right? So if we look at the net worth, which is if you take all the assets and all the liabilities and subtract the two, what's left, 45 million plus, African Americans today, it's roughly $1.5 trillion. But we just established that 4 million people held in bondage in 1860, over 150 years ago, had an economic value of about 22 trillion in today's equivalent. That means that 4 million people held in bondage in 1860 were worth 15 times more than 45 million people who are free today, right? 153 years later. That's just the math. Now you might say, well, that was a really long time ago. A lot's happened since then. It was a terrible period. Lots of people have come here, they have struggled, and they've gone on to do well. Why is it that Black people have not done well, right? There's been plenty of time to correct that. And here's the challenge with that. Those people left bondage with no economic resources, right? If you go back to 1870, Black folks own about 0.17% of US wealth, effectively nothing. And I'm sure you remember from social studies or history class, they kind of talk about 40 acres and a mule and the Homestead Act, right? We all know that 40 acres and a mule was never actually distributed. That was a discussion about providing some startup capital in terms of land and a mule to help newly freed people get a start in life post-emancipation. What I always thought was interesting is what would that have been worth in today's dollars, right? Both the 40 acres and a mule and the Homestead Act. So if we take a look at that, you got, 4 million people held in bondage, 40 acres, per person is 160 million acres. It's just a gigantic amount of land. If you look at the cost of an acre in the US, it varies between roughly $3,020 and $6,350. By the way, this is farmland that we're talking about. We are not talking about, LA acres or Bay Area acres or Manhattan or Miami or any of that kind of stuff, right? This is just kind of farmland. Quick math puts that as high as $1 trillion in today's equivalent, which would be generating about $90 billion a year. That's what that would have been worth economically if it had been distributed in today's dollars. But that never occurred. And even though that 1 trillion is a really large number, it's only about 2% of the 50 trillion that was extracted from those folks and from their predecessors. But if we fast forward a little bit, we can look at a land distribution that actually did happen, because in 1862, Congress passed an act called the Homestead Act, in which they would proceed to distribute 246 million acres to about 1.5 million white families, right? Over the next 60-year period, massive distribution of land. If we look at it from the same perspective, in terms of the value of an acre of farmland, it would place the value of that distribution at about $1.6 trillion, or roughly about $1 million per family. Now, I'm all about hard work and bootstraps, but $1 million is a hell of a start, right? In life. So how did this thing work? The way it worked was that you had the opportunity to claim about 160 acres, right, of land. And if you were so fortunate to be able to make that claim, if you stayed on that land for about 5 years, you could take possession of it at the end of it without actually paying anything for it. Now, if you were from Europe and you came over here, and you came with nothing but the shirt on your back, which many people did, and you were so fortunate to be able to claim one of these lots, at the end of 5 years, not only did you take possession of that land, but you also could naturalize or become a citizen, because that's how long it took you to become a citizen, back in those days. So imagine coming from a land of destitution to a land of plenty and having a start like this. Now, researchers say that in terms of direct beneficiaries, there's up to 93 million Americans that are direct beneficiaries of this. So not secondary, tertiary, they're related to it in some way or form, direct beneficiaries, right? So on the one hand, you've got $1 trillion of economic resources denied to a group for whom so much was taken from in the first place, and then, almost 2 trillion distributed to, 1.5 million, white families. So if we fast forward a little bit, we can, we're into the period of the Civil War. And emancipation. The Southern economy is devastated, right? The global cotton market is devastated. The land confiscated in the South is returned to the white planter class. What we have to remember is because of the rebellion of the South, which is actual literal treason, all of their land was confiscated by the North. So it did not belong to them, but it was returned to them after they were defeated. And the world, people need large, cheap, readily available labor. Now, I'm gonna just circle back here because there's a lot that's going on during this period. The short version is the global cotton market employed about 20 million people. 1 million of those people lost their jobs. Cotton was the equivalent of oil, right? In terms of its effect. Raw cotton from the United States dominated 80% of the total market. And raw cotton picked by Black people in the South was about 61% of US export. I mean, you just can't beat free labor and the global dominance, associated with what Black people in the South were doing. And the economic value of those people is 50% of everything in the South. So, and the Civil War creates this thing called a global cotton famine, which is all these industrialized countries that are using this raw material, they don't have it. They don't have as much. So it affects Egypt, it affects India, it affects Europe, it affects Japan, it affects like the whole industrial world. So the world is crying out, what is America going to do to put her newly freed people back to work, right? And the answer and a solution to that is this thing that we call Jim Crow. Now, Jim Crow is one of the least descriptive names for a period in time, right? It's like, what is that? What does it even mean, right? So let's talk a little bit about that. So what Jim Crow is a system of laws and customs that's reinforced with an extraordinary level of violence to reimpose 100% tax on a sharecropper's labor. Now, I know it sounds hyperbolic. I know it sounds like I'm going overboard by saying 100% tax on people's labor after slavery, right? But what I will do is I will let you decide whether or not you think it really is 100% tax. So let's talk about this kind of sharecropping, what it is and how does it work. So after emancipation, those large mega plantations were broken into smaller lots, right? Black families would agree to settle on those lots and plant cash crops. And at the end of the season, they would share in a portion of the crop that they brought to market. Literally, that's where the name comes from, sharecropping. What we gotta understand is it was an actual contract that the family signed, right, with a white landowner. All the terms and conditions of that contract were set by the small white farmer. Some of those terms and conditions said that if you fell ill during that harvest and you couldn't do your work, they could outsource it to somebody else, have somebody else do it, and then charge you back for what it costs them to have somebody else do your portion of it. The other thing that we have to understand is that those people left with virtually no economic resources whatsoever. And if the harvest doesn't come tomorrow, it comes at the end of the year or at the end of the season. So between now and then, that farmer has to provide you with the tools and the fertilizer and clothes and house and meals, everything that you need, right? And they're doing that on credit at interest rates as high as 70% per year. So they're setting what all your expenses are, right? And the value of your expenses. The other thing is that at the end of the year, when you take these crops to market, that white farmer is the market. That person tells you what your crops are worth. Now think about this. If a person controls your costs and they control your revenue, your income, because they tell you what it's worth, by definition, that means they control your profit. And I think you start to see where I mean by 100% tax, right? So if you're fortunate, your profit will be zero at the end of the year. If you're unfortunate, because they don't want you to go to someone else who might be more generous, your profit will be negative, which means you owe them. They'll roll that into next year, and now you're in perpetual debt servitude. Very difficult to accumulate wealth and resources under this kind of construct. Now, I know what you're thinking, right? I would never agree to something like this. That's a horrible deal, period, end of story. I'm not doing it. And I got it, and I understand, and I agree with you. It's a horrible deal. But here's the challenge. If you don't take that deal, they got laws for that. And those laws are called vagrancy laws, which those laws state that if you cannot prove that you are gainfully employed or that you are a landowner, they could charge you with a criminal offense and put you in a state or county jail, right? Now, you might not have seen that one coming, and I might prompt you to want to sign that contract. But then upon second thought, you're like, you know what? I'm still not going to do the work. It's a bad deal. If you do that, they have something for that. Those laws are called contract enforcement laws, which means that you signed that employment agreement and you broke it. So now they can charge you with a criminal offense and put you in a state or county jail, right? Now you might say, well, I'll just sit in jail. I'm still not going to do the work. And you could feed me 3 square meals a day until you get tired, then you can let me out. I'll go about my business. They have something for that, and it's called convict leasing, which means that they will lease you back out to that same white farmer or a private corporation that you never wanted to work for in the first place. Now, here's something that you need to know and understand about convict leasing. You can argue in one respect that it's even worse than slavery. In this one respect, which is while a slave owner will kill you and beat you within an inch of your life, slaves are expensive. And they would much rather have you around for another 5 or 10 or 15 years to maximize the return on their investment, right? They have what's known as an interest in your residual value, having you around for a while. Under convict leasing, they have no such interest. They only care about you during that 6, 8, 18-month time period that you're with them. Your health, your well-being beyond that period, they have no interest in. And under such conditions, you're looking at mortality rates approaching 50%. Translation is a 1 in 2 chance of death under those conditions, right? Now, as draconian as that is, it's extremely lucrative. If you go back to 1914, about 20% of the state of Alabama's revenues is coming from convict leasing alone, right? Now, here's what's interesting to note. Countries go through difficult periods all the time, right? And then you can kind of get to the other side. But this wasn't a bad 3 or 4 year period, or even 5 year period, or even 10 year period, right? This thing lasted for roughly 75 years, from about 1870 or so to about 1945, during which time 4,000 Black people were lynched. That's a public execution by your fellow American, right? Nobody's been prosecuted for those executions. It's the equivalent of 1 Black person per week being executed for 75 years, right? Under those types of conditions, you'll get the hint, your family gets the hint, your church gets the hint, your community gets the hint, right? And there is a quote from a farmer, a sharecropper in the Mississippi Delta. And he said, listen, I've been working these deltas for 30 years, and I know every year I've been robbed. But what can I do? If you speak up, you get cussed. If you raise up, you get shot, right? And that ends that. So if someone controls your revenue, they control your costs, and they can do what they want with impunity, you can see that that's 100% tax on your labor. And if that is the case, that means that by definition, it is slavery. And that's why this period of time is called slavery by another name. You guys may have heard that, right? So if we think about that, right, during a period of legal state enforced slavery, up to 50 trillion was extracted from people. And this was the equivalent of that in terms of extraction. It lasted for 75 years, which is another third of that period. That you can argue over the next 75 years, they were able to extract another 15 trillion from Black people. If you go back to 1860, you got 4 million Black people working in the fields in the South. If you fast forward to 1935, you still got almost 4 million Black people working in the South under these sharecropper, tenant farmer type, conditions, right? So the way to understand this is that upon emancipation and the end of the Civil War, that white Panther class loses about $22 trillion worth of value at that time. But then over the next 75 years or so, they would claw back about 15 trillion from newly freed people and their descendants, right? So when we start to think about the impact of Jim Crow, we're talking about massive, enormous amounts, right? Now you could say, listen, technically not every single person was under a Jim Crow construct. Some people did get an education. W.E.B. Du Bois was able to go to Harvard, in the early, late 1800s. And education is a great equalizer. It's a true statement, right? What we have to understand from a contextual perspective is, upon emancipation, the white Panther class was not interested in educating newly freed Black people. Their children were educated in a private system. They wanted massive, cheap, abundant labor. But the smaller white farmers did want to expand public education for their children. Obviously, newly freed people wanted expanded public education. The large planter class needed the help of the smaller white farmers, so they agreed to expand public education, but with the intention of diverting resources from Black children to white children. If you look at the words of W.E.B. Du Bois, he says, in the 40 years since emancipation, Negro taxes and the Negro share of income from indirect taxes has fully repaid, right, any investment in the Negro's education. This is by white people. The point he was making is so little was invested in newly freed people's education that what was invested by Black people covered what had already been done by white people. The interest was not in developing Black folks. And if you think of the words of Thomas Logan, who is a former Confederate general, and he was an industrialist at the time, he echoes the sentiment of that class, which is when the freedman regards himself qualified to earn a support by mental work, he is unwilling to accept manual labor. By mental work, it means using your intellectual horsepower and skill set and prowess to do work with your mind, as opposed to doing work with your body. And they were interested in Black people doing work with their bodies. If you look at the words of William H. Baldwin, who was the president of the General Education Board at the time, back in 1914, what he says, and he's kind of like the Department of Education before the Department of Education. That's the way to think of his role. He says the South needed Negroes educated so they could be the best possible laborers, right? With the right kind of education, Negroes will willingly work menial jobs, and that will open up opportunities for Southern whites to work the more expert labor. What you need to understand is under slavery, the artisans, the craftspeople were actually Black, right? But outside of slavery, those roles were reserved for white people. It was very difficult for Black people to have those roles in a ratio that would make sense. If you go to 1917, there are only about 64 public high schools in the South for Black people. Again, that's not a district, that's not a city, that's not a state, that's across the entire South, right? Very little investment in the education of Black people. And most schoolhouses were built and owned by Black people. Obviously, these were appendages to churches and to church facilities. If you go to 1920 and the New York City public school system, New York is investing 50 times more per child. 50 times more than South Carolina is investing in the Black children and their segregated school system. Just think about that. Think about if you came from Europe with nothing, but you move into an area where they're investing 50 times more in your education, your human capital development, than a child in South Carolina is getting, whose family and legacy has been here for hundreds of years. Again, in the South, for every dollar invested to educate a Black child, 5 to 8 were invested to educate a white child. That's not, we don't need rocket science to analyze that. If you do that with your own family, one child is going to go to Harvard, the other one's going to be impoverished, right? Black teachers in the South are earning about 25 to 34 cents on a dollar to what their white peers are earning for the same subject matter. And white students are receiving 50 years more of education than Black students by the time they reach the age of 25, right? The level of malinvestment, right, in the education of Black people is so great that Gary Becker, who wrote The Economics of Discrimination and is also a Nobel Prize winner, said that in the last 50 years, and he said this in the 1950s, Negroes have advanced little in relative occupational hierarchy. So it just means you open up a new plant, there's another new role for a Black janitor, right? Not for a Black manager, and so on and so forth. And then, of course, researchers say that if you'd kept the other discrimination the same, but invested equally in the children, right, during the educational process, that alone could have cut the wage gap by about 50%, right? So if you look at that over a generation of millions of Black children, that's over $600 billion of loss associated with that. If you look at that over multiple generations, over a 90-year period from 1865 to 1954, we have Brown v. Board of Education. We're talking about over $3 trillion of loss due to malinvestment into Black children and to Black people, right? So that's very enormous and significant, right? You know, you could say, well, back in those days, having a super duper education wasn't all that important. We all have a story about a relative, maybe a grandfather or great grandfather, that only had a 3rd grade or 5th grade education, but an incredible work ethic, and they built a home and they did phenomenal things for their families, right? Which is extremely true. And so what you needed was really housing, right? And that was the great wealth builder, which is very true. As we all know, being a homeowner is part of the American dream, and the government takes it very seriously, and they invest accordingly in that dream, which is a wonderful thing, right? You know, at the time, the government invested $120 billion, which is the equivalent of about $1 trillion today, in subsidizing, you know, home acquisition for its citizens, right? Which is a wonderful thing. Had everything to do with the creation of kind of the middle class that exists today. The challenge with that is that less than 2% of all that investment went to Black Americans, right? However, the 20+ million Europeans that immigrated here after they became citizens had access to all those resources, but Black people who had been here and whose lineage had been here for hundreds of years did not. So I won't go into the whole concept of redlining. You guys probably have heard about that, or the FHA, but you know, the federal government guaranteed homeowners, right? They said they would pay the bill. That reduced the risk. It made banks feel more comfortable to take lower down payments, take a longer time to repay a loan. That's where the 30-year mortgage comes from, and to charge you lower, you know, interest rates. But they would not provide that guarantee for Black people. The financial institutions, the banks followed suit, and they didn't lend to Black people, particularly if they wanted to buy land in white communities. If you went directly to the developers, they wouldn't participate either. Real estate agents didn't participate, and even residents signed agreements amongst themselves called covenants that says, you know, if I move from this community, I will only sell my house to a person who is of European heritage or who is Caucasian, right? So you got a complete wall that prevents Black people from getting into communities that are better resourced for the development of their children. You know, all that sounds really touchy-feely and qualitative, but what we can say in a concrete way is that between 1930 and 1960, less than 1% of all mortgages in the country went to Black people. Now, mind you, the real estate market within America is the greatest wealth building institution that the world has ever known. On average, real estate is about 64% of the wealth of the average Black family. It's super critical, right? And Black people were largely prevented from being able to do so. Now, just because you can't get a mortgage in this way doesn't mean that you don't want to be a part of the American dream. You still want to be a homeowner. You still want to be part of that dream. So what people did was they turned to the private markets under something called a contract sale. These are unregulated markets. You don't have to have an appraisal. People are selling homes at 2 times their value. They're having extreme interest rates. And there is no equity in the house as you pay it off, right? That's actually the worst part of the whole construct. The way it would work is if you made an agreement to make 100 payments and then you take possession of a house, if you made 99 of those payments, miss the 100th, they could keep your 99 payments, keep your down payments, evict you from the house, resell it to somebody else. Again, very extremely difficult, right, to accumulate wealth under this construct. If you think about that Chicagoland area, that greater Chicago area, which is a huge area for migration for Black people who left the South during that time period, In the 50s, it's estimated that 85% of all real estate transactions for Black people in that area was under this construct of contract sales, right? Very difficult to accumulate wealth. If you look at rent within these kind of poor Black urban inner city communities at the time, the rent was actually 50% higher than it was outside of these communities, which doesn't make any sense initially when you kind of think about it, because you're like, well, why would the rent be higher? What we have to remember is, you know, for the decades, you know, prior to this and during this period of time, you've got a migration of millions of people out of the South into northern cities who are escaping terrorism really in the South and looking for better opportunities, but they're unable to go into all of these other communities that are well resourced. So they're being corralled into local areas within inner cities. But what happens when the demand, the need for something goes up? Housing, right? Faster than the availability of the housing, the price goes up, right? When the supply doesn't meet demand. So the rents are actually were higher in these communities than outside these communities. Again, it's very difficult to accumulate wealth under those circumstances. The Federal Trade Commission did a study in 1968, and they found that goods and services, things sold within these communities, were selling at 3 times the value that they actually were worth, 3 times what they were worth outside of these communities. Very difficult to accumulate wealth. And if you just wanted to hunker down and just kind of work hard, you had to deal with discrimination in the labor market. And researchers place that level of discrimination, what it actually costs Black people, right, in terms of salary and other benefits, at $1.6 trillion in 1983 dollars. If we put that into today's dollars, it's over $4 trillion. Extremely difficult to accumulate resources under those circumstances. This is, so if we look at, like, you know, white Americans born between 1943 and 1951, they would go on to accumulate 11 times more wealth than their peers, Black peers who were born at that time. You know, what we're led to believe is that's about the decisions that you've made or not made. It's about hard work and stick-to-itiveness and determination, all those kinds of things. But when you really take a look at the data and the context, you see that the environment, right, has so much more to do with that difference in wealth than we were kind of otherwise led to believe. So the impact in terms of housing is extraordinary. Won't have time to go into that. Won't have time to go into the New Deal and the GI Bill, which are, you know, huge investments that were made into the American public, or even to talk about interstate highway development, which was significant. And then post-civil rights, like what happened, you know, post the civil rights era to the present? What was the cost of discrimination against, you know, against Black people? And it was, you know, quite significant. We won't have time to go through all that. I cover all the material in that in the book, which you guys will get a copy of. And I strongly encourage you to read. You'll find it enlightening, right? So where are we now, right? Let's talk a little bit about that. So right now, the Black community is missing about $1.5 trillion worth of income. 1 trillion of that is from the missing businesses that we have within our community. $500 billion of that is associated with consumer income, right? That's just, you know, salaries and so on and so forth of the kind of Black public. We talked about a massive gap in wealth that we're missing. It's actually much larger than this amount now. And we previously talked about the missing jobs and businesses across the Black community, which is even worse now given the COVID epidemic. When I was doing research for the book, I saw this number that kept coming up again and again and again. And it was 2%, 2%, 2%. So it felt like a rule or a paradigm of some kind. And it seemed like for areas that are really critical to wealth accumulation for Black people, we tend to hover around a participation rate of about 2%. Let me give you a couple of examples. If you look at corporate supply chain spend, now corporate supply chain is just companies buy stuff from other companies so they can make their products, right? Every company, every institution, every government, every household has to do that. You got to buy stuff from other people to meet your goals. We call that supply chain spend. Less than 2% of that is spent on Black business. Again, I'm not talking about minority business. I'm talking about Black business specifically. If you look at government supply chain spend, the government spends an incredible amount of money buying stuff from all kinds of businesses. At every level, federal, state, local, is less than 2% that goes to Black enterprise. If you even look at the spend that Black people have amongst themselves, less than 2% of our total income, which is roughly 1.2 trillion, goes to Black enterprise, which is problematic. If you look at really high growth, high compensation fields, technology, and a whole number of other places, our rate of participation or number of Black people tends to be around 2% level across, all of it. If you even look at the banking industry or the banking system, only $4 out of every $10,000 in the U.S. banking system is in a Black bank. They just don't have enough resources to provide the loans and the capital to businesses that would need them. And even if you look at the Small Business Administration, which provides lending to small businesses, less than 2% of that goes to Black enterprise, right? It's roughly 1.6%. So all of this creates a very negative, depressive impact on job creation and business development in the Black community. When I did a talk, my first talk at Google, folks really got a much better understanding, right, of the financial cost of discrimination against Black people. But I got asked this question, which was, we see more robustly what happened, right, when it came to the cost of discrimination for Black people. But could you also tell us a little bit about what the cost has been for the country? I thought that was a brilliant question. I did not have the answer at the time. I told them that I would think about it and I would get back to them. I was fortunate enough to be asked to come back to Google and speak a second time, which I appreciated it. And I answered the question at that time, and I'll share that answer with you guys, right? And I looked at it from this perspective. What if Black Americans have been allowed to participate fully in the innovation system that drove the economy, right? Now, I spent a lot of time talking to you about this period, right, of Jim Crow from 1870 to 1945. But what we got to remember is that this period is one of the most important periods of the Industrial Revolution, right? At the same time, you got 2.5 million patents are created, right? A patent is a great idea that you come up with that's new and transformative, and it gets allocated to you. And for a certain period of time, you can make money off of that idea. Things that were discovered created during that period of time, you're talking about the telephone and the light bulb and the radios and motion pictures and photocopiers and airplanes and automobiles and transistors and semiconductors, everything that's really critical for our economy right now. Those innovations were happening, at that period of time. 2.5 million patents were created, right? How many from Black people? 726 are attributed to Black people out of 2.5 million total created. That's almost a complete shutout in ability to participate in that. Why is this really important? If you look at Professor Kortun from Yale, he says that patents can be thought of as proportional improvements in productivity, and that a constant rate of new patents can generate a constant rate of new economic growth. This is true, it's empirical. You can look this up, it exists, right? The Brookings Institute said the nation's unequal access to high quality education deprives the innovation system of people who might otherwise create or commercialize important discoveries. This is really important. Now, something I want to kind of emphasize and re-emphasize is that talent, skill, capability, all that stuff follows what's called a normal distribution. Fancy way of saying 70% of the people tend to be in the middle, 15% tend to be significantly above average. I call that the ultra brilliant. We all like to think we're part of that group, right? And then 15% are below average. I thought a really important question was, what was the size of that 15%, that ultra brilliant portion of the Black population during this period of time that we just examined? And what was that brilliance actually doing, right? So if you go back to 1870, that's about 700,000+ people. Again, that's not the population of Black people, that's just that 15% of ultra brilliant. 1900 is roughly 1.3 million. 1930, it's almost 1.8. 1950 is 2.3. What was that brilliance doing, right? You're talking about sharecropping and tenant farming, right? The application of that brilliance was fully underutilized during that period of time. What did that cost the country? What was the impact in terms of income and wealth for America because of that underutilization? If those people had been utilized appropriately, we would have seen 280,000 more patents. That would have led to over $2 trillion more in national income for the nation, right? On top of what we're seeing now, and over $9 trillion more of wealth. That's what was lost by utilizing those people. From Michigan State did a really interesting study. She said, what if white people experienced the level of trauma that Black people experience? What would have happened to innovation specifically? And her research says that if white people experienced the level of trauma Black people experienced during that time, 40% of those patents would have never been created. That's 1 million patents. straight off the books right away. Which of those things could we afford to lose? What would have been the economic impact? The economic impact would have been almost a $8 trillion impact to national income and $30+ trillion of wealth that would have been lost. The thing we all have to know is that discrimination has a negative impact. It costs both the party that discriminates and the person who gets discriminated against. We've seen that cost for Black people is massive and gargantuan and hard to comprehend, but it's also been massive for the country. I'm going to leave you with kind of two quotes here. The first being from Albert Einstein, and he said that the worst disease under which the society of our nation suffers, in my opinion, is the treatment of the Negro. And I've covered a little bit of that from an economic perspective in this talk. And then the second quote is from Emperor Selassie in his address to the United Nations in 1963. And he said the basis for racial discrimination has been economic, and it is with economics that these evils can be overcome. With that said, we can pause, talk a little bit about solutions, the PhD economic framework, the fact that we need to be specific. A minority does not necessarily mean Black, and any other questions that you have. Thank you very much. All right.
Shawn.
Yes, sir.
My name is Bobby Franklin. I spent 37 years of my life with Mattel Toy Company in corporate America at various levels of management, salesmanship and management over the course of a period from 1977 to 2013 or 2014. Always questioned when I was selected to be interviewed for a position with Mattel Toy Company, and I showed up in Los Angeles, California, and attended my first meeting. There was roughly 100, 150 individuals in this corporate conference room, and I was the only one that looked like me. And that was in 1977.
Yeah.
When I left out at the end of 2013, January 2014, I was still the only minority in the room when it came to managerial or salesmanship level at that major corporation. And they were the #1 toy manufacturer in the world. This 2% rule, and I my goal over the course of my journey at Mattel was, if I excelled, it would open up the possibility of someone else looking like me to be given an opportunity. And I would always communicate to them that I represented nothing special.
Right.
I was just blessed to be given an opportunity to participate. And with having an opportunity to participate, I figured out the rules of the games that they were playing by, and developed a level of success in that process. When you talk about the Jim Crow laws from 1870 to 1945, it made me think about this process had happened before when we talk about indentured servitude when it came to England and Ireland, where the landowners in England would lease out or allow these sharecropper people to work the land in Ireland. And once the crop came in, of course, they took the majority of the crop. And with indentured servitude, you could never get out of debt because they charged them for the materials, the seeds, the everything. So the Jim Crow laws, and from my perspective, equates to what was going on with indentured servitude. And I was watching a public television program not too long ago, and they had a professor of economics from Duke University, and he made a statement on that show that day that white Americans without a high school education has a greater percentage of wealth in this country than 2/3 of the minority population that has a college or advanced college educational degree in this country. And I found that fascinating. But if you think about all the things you talked about today, the challenges that was put in place for minorities, and the fact that even in the 30s and 40s and 50s, when white people were allowed to have home ownership and build equity over that time, and minorities weren't, that a lot of the jobs that was made available in manufacturing during that period was all given to non-educated white people. That created the base for them to be financially successful and grow over the decades where Blacks wasn't. So, you know, your book and what you talk about, I guess gives me a better understanding of why I was in the situation that I was. And what's amazing is that how I figured out how to traverse the minefields and get through that process. But your book, I'm holding out a lot of, I guess, enthusiasm and interest to get one so I can read it, man, because it is truly fascinating when you think about the economics of the situation that we're in today.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. What I wanted to do was just really lay out the fact pattern, right? Our minds are associative by nature. So if we don't understand how things came to be, we're just going to make an association between the people and the environment. Yes. And we're going to say that the outcomes that Black people are experiencing are because of things that Black people have done or not done, right? And if you believe that, then why do you need to do anything to invest in them to change the situation? But if you can have like a fact-based conversation that just kind of lays out how things evolved, and it actually didn't evolve, how it was constructed, right, to be in this place, it just becomes self-evident, right? A lot of people they have no idea about this, and how could they know? It's not in the curriculum in K through 12, right? It's not at university, and it's certainly not in our other institutions. So the knowing of this is really important to break down a lot of barriers and to have an effective conversation and to really help people to empathize and to understand and then start being a part of the solutioning of this, right? The Jim Crow construct was elegant, nefarious, and diabolical in design. There was no getting out of it. There was no, you weren't going to MacGyver your way out of it. There was no Hollywood version of, if it was me, I would have somehow done something else. And it's important for people who did not experience that and who are not, you know, a part of the Black community, particularly with that lineage, to really understand that. And to understand that not only was it a bad thing and a horrible thing and all these kind of qualitative terms, this took trillions of dollars out of the Black community. And money is temporal. That which we do today will have an impact in the future. You sacrifice today so that our children and their children and their children will have something. And if that is stripped away from people today, there's nothing to leave for tomorrow, right? So it was just to lay that out in a really fact-based way that's not, you know, emotional or hyperbolic, so that we can have really productive conversations.
Well, it's powerful.
Well,
your mic's off.
They need to know that this was intentional. Okay, this was intentional. This was not an accident. Okay, this was intentional. And so I'll let Dr. Bishop jump in. I know he's going to talk about this set of the sale or something like that.
Oh, absolutely.
Now that we know what has been intentionally done to Black people, what is intentionally done to brown people, now we can combat it. Those of us who are brave enough and strong enough and have the proper will to do so. But this is no accident.
Well, as I sit here and listen to Shawn just share these facts with us, I didn't say it in these kind of words, but that's messed up. But also, it tells me that we're right where we should be in helping these young guys understand that we teach them these principles and we tell them that these principles will guide them in the wilderness. It'll guide them when things are good, and it'll guide them when it's bad. Now, when I listen to Shawn talk, and I talked to Shawn earlier about this, I say, listen, okay. I said, for sure, this information need to be dispersed to our people, but then we also need solutions, because we live in a spiritual universe, guys, and we're spiritual beings. And one of the things that we have to understand that is this, that in all adversity, the Creator says that I'll put an equal or greater benefit. And so when I listen to this information with the kind of thinking I have, the first thing I'm saying is, wow, they might have devalued us as far as what they gave us, but look what we produced, although they kept it all. And so I was just looking for some of the principles that Boss shared with these young folks. And Shawn had talked about the challenges, and one of them was this. So I'm saying blaming and complaining. And we taught these young guys in our conference that there's some things that stop folks from ever reaching their greatness. And one of them is blaming and complaining. See, now all of this exists. Man, be mindful of that it's unfair, it's hard and it's rough, but just like in the book, The Road Less Traveled, once we accept this, it don't matter anymore. I'm here today, Boss is here today, Mr. Franklin is here today, Shawn is here today to say, listen, but what is all this saying about us? That from when slavery began to October the 10th, 2020, we're sitting up here with cell phones. We're sitting here with computers. Now, is that enough? Absolutely not. But what it says is we're some incredible people. And if we understand that, Everett, if we understand that if we go to work, because somebody back then didn't buy that stuff, right? Because look at where we are, but also I thought about this. Shawn talked about how they saw the value of making sure that we was educated to continue to be the labor in the craft that we was involved in, but also they seen the value of a miseducation so that we was willingly take menial jobs, that we willingly got exploited. And that's why we're here, guys, because we gotta realize that a lot of the slavery was mental. A lot of the things that's the problems we in because we put up with it. Yeah, they kept all the money, but the truth of the matter is this, that we go through trillions of dollars. And I seen a report, and I think Shawn said it too, but they don't make us take that $1 trillion and spend it with them. We choose to. As a matter of fact, the miseducation of us make us where we don't even really want to spend any money with each other. We don't like it. We have problems with each other. And the reason is this, that our genetic biology, which we teach to the young guys, is how you think, how you act, and how you feel. And how you think and how you act and how you feel creates what is called your personality. And your personality, as you know, Everett, and all the young men on this call, your personality creates your personal reality. And that being true, then a lot of our issues, right, is how we're thinking. And the problem is this: if we're going to solve this, Shawn, if we're going to change this, we can't do like we've been trying to do. We're trying to change our reality with the same personality, and it will not work. We're going to have to change the way we're thinking. And that's why we're here, guys, because this problem does exist. We don't want to minimize it, right? But until we understand that we got to create a vision larger than our present circumstances, right? And once we do that, then we can even move at a greater pace of closing this gap. But also too, I ask this question, right? Why is it that some has been able to overcome this? Because like they said, 2% been able to play. And I ask myself, that sounds like the same 2% that got library cards, Everett, right? Mm-hmm. See, we know that they say it's about 3, but 2%, 3%, that we teach the kids that the most common thread amongst highly successful people is that they're readers. They have library cards in their home. That's the most common thing in somebody's house who has a house over a couple $100,000 is they're gonna have a library. That leaders are readers. See, it does no good to give everybody that book if they're not going to read it. Malcolm X said, you want to hide something from my people, put it in a book. But we're helping to empower folks with this information. So these young guys on Boss, they're readers, they're game changers. And not only are they game changers, they're finding their purpose. We helping them to find their purpose. And then they know that they got to pay it forward like Mr. Franklin and Mr. Glenn, and they got to go back and help someone else find theirs. So I just like to open this up to Shawn and the rest of them. Shawn, what do you think the solution to this is? I just shared with you what I thought it was.
Well, and before you answer that, Shawn, before you answer that, I want you to know that as Marvin has said, our boys are different, right? And so we got a patent pending invention. Okay, right now, our boys developed an app called Safe Encounter, and they entered the MIT Global Appathon, and they played up like they do in sports. So they competed in the over 18 category. Although we had a 6th grader and a couple of 8th graders and a couple of 9th graders and just one high school graduate who's a freshman. He was on this call now, but he had a class at Long Beach State. And so we created this app called Safe Encounters. It's got 5 distinct features. By the time we enhance it and publish it to Google Play, it's going to be voice activated, and we're going to commercialize it. So that's part of the solution, is getting these guys and turning them into entrepreneurs. And
that's right.
That's part of the solution.
That's right.
So so let me say a couple things. This is what is the solution? Is not a 2-minute answer.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
Part of the problem that I want everybody to understand is there's no silver bullet, right? So this has been going on in this place that we call America for 400 years, but it's been going on in general for 576 years, right? There's no one thing that led us here. There's no one thing that will get us out of it. This is a long-term commitment to the advancement and development, right, of your people and of yourself, and of doing more than just for you and for your family, but to be able to do things to affect people outside of the family union. So the first thing I laid out was, what is the history? And what is still happening now? Because people like to think that we're in a post-racial society. So all of this is behind us. I've spoken to you about nothing that's happening right now, right? That's for another conversation. You guys can read about that in the book, which I cover in a very thorough way. The first thing is people have understanding and context and perspective. People have really strong feelings about things. They're very passionate about their positions. They have very little information. They have even less context, but they have asymmetric power. They're very powerful and they have a lot of resources, and they can impose conditions upon people based on their misinformation and misunderstanding. So part of it is to interface this knowledge and information with as many people as possible, both people within the Black community, anybody who interfaces with the Black community, super critical. And of course, it needs to be within curriculums and at the primary, secondary, tertiary level. The other piece is you have to have a framework by which you judge the impact of that which you are doing or plan to do. When America broke off from the colonialization to be its own nation, the first thing they did was created a framework. That framework is called the Constitution, but it just says that we are going to operate within this context, and the plans and ideas and the strategies and policies, whatever we come up with, we're gonna measure it versus this framework to see whether or not it's the right thing to do and that it's consistent. You need a framework. And the framework that I came up with this idea of purchase, hire, and deposit in ways that create jobs, create and expand business, and provide capital in the Black community. I call it PhD, right? Policies, plans, programs need to be consistent with PhD. Why is that? Because we got a massive jobs gap. That's been the same issue that's been talked about for the last 153 years, in all decades and all permutations, right? We have a massive gap in business. It's the same issue that we've been talking about for the last 153 years, all decades and all permutation. And there's a massive gap in wealth, right? And the worst position you can possibly be in a capitalist society is to not have any capital, right? And people were given freedom with no capital, which is to not be given freedom, at all. So you've got to have this framework to judge things. And PhD says, the P is, if you're an individual, it's how you spend your money. You don't need permission to do that, right? If you're a corporation, it's your supply chain, the business that you do with other folks. So do we utilize Black attorneys and Black architects. And when we buy homes, which is a wonderful thing, do we have a Black realtor? Do we get a Black appraiser? You know what I mean? And if we are so blessed to have a home, and many people are not, and you wanted to fix it up, do you work with a Black contractor or carpenter or drywall or roofer or plumber or any of these wonderful kind of, you know, trades and opportunities? Do we utilize these folks, right? We buy 5 million cars a year as a people. It's almost $95 billion. We spend more on cars than we spend on homes. Do you buy from a Black dealer, right? The 16,000 dealers before COVID, 264 of them were Black dealers, right? There should be 2,000 of them. We should have hundreds of thousands of jobs associated with that. We don't need anybody's permission, right, to spend money with and amongst ourselves. We could do that as just a primary thing for us to decide that that's what's important, right? We can create more lawyers, but are we going to utilize them, right? You can create more doctors, right? Are we going to do business with them, and dentists and so on and so forth? So these are really, really, you know, important things. The second thing is to let, you know, organizations and corporations know what we value. We value PhD, that you have a proper representation of Black people, not only on your payroll, right, your employees, but also in your supply chain, and that you're using your cash, your balance sheet, to put that into institutions that are putting lending in the Black community. And we're starting to see that happen, right? You know, Netflix decided they're going to put 2% of their cash, right, roughly $100 million, into Black financial institutions to provide lending out into the communities. That's a good thing. That's a good start, right? We need to scale that in a really massive way. We need to let our alma maters, our universities that we go to or we've been to, know that, yes, we care deeply about the representation of Black people in the student body. We care deeply about the representation of Black people at the professorial level in front of the class. But behind every professor is 10 to 15 people that make that university work well, and they get paid extremely well. What's the Black representation there? Those are gigantic economic institutions, right, that spend billions of dollars on other business. Where's Black business in that? Who manages their pension funds? Are they Black fund managers, so on and so forth? We have to think about things through a lens of PhD. It helps to strengthen the programs and policies that people are putting in place, and it helps to get that multiplier effect, right? That circulation of dollars and resources. If you look at just about any plan, program, or policy that's not working well for Black people, it's because it's not consistent with this notion of PhD. It's not stimulative from the perspective of creating jobs, business, or providing capital, you know, to Black people in particular. So you've got to be aware of a framework, and then we got to be applying that framework both on a personal level. You know, it doesn't make sense to not have any economic connections with the Black community, but yet to be opining on what other people should be, you know, should be doing, right? It doesn't make sense to elect people who don't, you know, pursue policies that are consistent with that. And if they do pursue those policies, support them 1,000, you know, %, right? Once you have a framework in place, now we can start talking about which of the actions or policies make the most sense, have the largest impact, right? And how should they be structured over time to have the biggest impact. So that's what I would say now. First is to be educated on the matter, right, as fully as one can be. It's to understand what the framework should look like, and then we begin to develop the policies that'll have the greatest impact.
All right. Do we have any questions from any of the young men out there? Well, let me ask.
I did have one question in regards to, and I know it's quite anecdotal. My name is Johnny Walls. I'm an academic coach with the BOSS program. And this was a great presentation. By the way, I just wanted to know where's the disconnect between the millionaires far and few among us and the people without the capital, without the jobs. I recently found out about a particular island in Florida called Fisher Island, or was once called Fisher Island. It was owned by one of the first, well, he was a Black millionaire in the real estate industry. And where did the disconnect? He sold the land because he couldn't find enough workers to work the land. He wanted to make it like a Black paradise, but it didn't happen, so he sold it. And so where does the disconnect happen there? Like, how can we bridge the gap between those with the funding and those that don't have it?
That's a big question. First, from a framework perspective, to what extent do these people practice PhD? Somebody's managing their money. Is it us or is it somebody else? Because you think of it as what I call is economic leakage, right? We have massive economic leakage. So let's say I have $50 million. I don't know what people view as real money, right? Let's just assume that it's that. And I decide that, my corporation is doing really well. I'm going to expand. I'm going to build a new structure. I'm going to engage with a commercial real estate broker. And they're going to get a massive portion of that when I buy or build this new structure. Is that a Black firm? Almost 98% of the time, the answer is no, right? That's an opportunity to transfer millions of dollars into another business who has employees and a supply chain of its own, right? And that's using that person's kind of business infrastructure. Do they actually practice PhD, right? The answer is, most times the answer is no. If you look at their own personal in terms of what they're doing, the cars that they buy, the people that manage their money, the accounting, the audit services, the legal services that they get, their portfolio of expertise, right? Your wise counsel, for which you pay a pretty penny to what extent are we integrated into that group? Because that money flows out of our community into others. Again, you do not have to be absolute. You do not have to be 100%. It doesn't have to be Black or nothing. But what it cannot be is 2% of that which you are spending, no matter how much you're worth, right? It's actually even worse as you're much, much larger. So those are some of the things, the natural connections, so that as I progress and I go from 50 to 100 million and to 1 billion, I'm taking the ecosystem around me with me, right? Apple has 20,000 companies that it procures from. As Apple has grown over the decades and dominated the world and provided all of these great and wonderful variations, right, of these kind of portable phones, they have taken that ecosystem with them. It's not just them. That is the power of practicing a version of this PhD. So are they doing it, right? And the answer is a lot of these people do not. So part of filling that gap is being intentional about doing that when possible and where possible. And that's not only happening with millionaires, right? Because that's a relatively small, group of people. That's happening with just the middle class and regular people. We don't do business with us. Now, I'm not saying you got to do business with anybody you don't want to do business with, but when possible, where possible, we should always seek to do business with high quality Black product and service providers. It makes sense. That is what other communities do with whom we admire. Right? They literally do PhD, but it's with respect to their own community. It's a normal state. It's a great thing that they should do. To what extent are we practicing it? And by the way, are we doing it now? Because that which you do now, you're going to repeat, whether you got 100 million or 50 million or 5 million or 1 billion or whatever it is that you do. The interconnections are broken or never established in the first place. And that is what is really, really, important, right? When you get a new Black CEO, does that result in an increase in Black people on payroll and Black business and supply chain and the utilization of your balance sheet to provide liquidity in the Black community? It often doesn't. So therefore, what is the great impact? You become more of a symbol than an economic engine. And we don't need symbols, right? We need economic engines, right? To drive and to help and to uplift our community. And those are individuals who can choose to do something different tomorrow. That's the power of spreading and sharing that message for the person to say, you know what? I didn't really think about that, because they didn't. It's not nefarious, right? But now that you know better, that saying, you could do better, right? So part of it is making sure that people know so that they can do, and then hold them accountable, right? So that's what I would say to that question, and thank you for it.
Shawn, it's Bobby Franklin again. You make me think in terms of there's a systematic process in place that is being promoted daily, weekly, monthly, yearly to keep us from getting to that point. There are people and plans in place that they are utilizing the power of advertising, the power of marketing, every power that they have to to prevent us from getting to that point. I grew up in the Cleveland, Ohio area, and what you just said made me think about what a basketball player that came out of Akron, Ohio, LeBron James, did when it came time to determine who was going to handle his money, the advice, he was going to be taken from the individuals that would be responsible for his money. And he took his friends, his Black friends, and financed the educational piece in order for them to be in a position to take care of what his, I guess, economic masses was going to be. And he was criticized to the 10th degree for doing it because it didn't conform to the programs that, and I'll say, white America has built into the system already to keep us from thinking about making these revolutionary decisions that don't include the programs that they've already put in place. It's like brainwashing. And if you make the decision to go against the grain, then you're I guess you're vandalized for it. It's like you're doing, it's like you're doing something wrong. So
yeah. So you have to do two parts, right? Part of it is structural. So you want to do business and you don't know where, you don't know how, you don't know who, all that kind of stuff, because it hasn't been allowed to develop. And then part of it is psychological, which is when we close our eyes and we think about doctors, lawyers, engineers, we don't see ourselves, right? We see all these other people. So if you're not doing it consciously, you might move in a subconscious way into that direction. So first we have to set out the framework, educate people as to why this is so important. And at the end of the day, it creates jobs, business, and capital, which is not only great for Black families and communities, it's great for the country, right? This actually expands the pie. It's positive in every conceivable way. There's no negative version of this, regardless of what anybody else's thinks or believes. And then when you think about it from a PhD standpoint, you're like, okay, this is fantastic. Now that you have your institution, you can have control over the teachers that are in front of these young people, right? We've done studies and researchers show that if you have 2 Black teachers over the course of your K through 12 career, just 2 out of the scores, you are 34% more likely to graduate from a 4-year institution. Just the presence of 2. It's also established by data and research that non-Black teachers have 40% lower expectations for Black students than Black teachers. You gotta have Black teachers in front of these students. And if it's your school, you have power and control to the extent that you can and that they're available, make sure that they are there, right? It's a net positive, it's a net win for everyone, involved. And now if you do have a school, schools have supply chain. You buy stuff from people. You got to feed kids. You got to have books. You got a whole host, leadership development training, curriculum development, all that kind of stuff. To what extent are you using high quality Black skills and businesses and service providers within that supply chain that can be transformative, right? When it comes to business development. The PhD framework keeps us all on track. And by the way, it's not just a statement for Black people. It's anybody who's interested in economic development when it comes to the Black community in particular. Make sure we're properly represented. Once you follow that framework, you don't get off track from an economic perspective, and you don't stray away from economics and get into symbolism. We have to be very careful with non-economic symbolism, right? What we're missing is jobs, business, and capital, and that's what people need to deliver, right? Not things that are symbolic. So I think it's wonderful that he is practicing PhD. He has an ecosystem of Black professionals around him that are very capable, that have demonstrated that they can deliver extraordinary value. But we got to get away from outliers. And outliers, the one data point that's way off, right? Because it's not representative of the full pool. That needs to be more normal practice, not outliers, because it's very difficult to replicate outliers, right? And that's part of the problem. Success is possible for Black people, but it's probable for white people. There's a very big difference, right? And I'm not interested in just dealing with possibilities for our children. I want to be dealing with probabilities, right? When it comes to our young people.
Exactly.
I have a question, Mr. Rochester.
Please. Hey, Daniel.
Yeah. So my name is Daniel, and I'm the program coordinator for the BOSS program. And in light of everything going on with our youth, we have youth on the call who, one, don't have money so they cannot
Yep.
purchase Black. They don't have a business and they cannot hire Black, and they don't have any access to Black banks. So I think, would it be possible for you to quickly go through some of the ideas in CPR for the Soul? Simply because I do think that some of those ideas can really be applicable for the youth on the call, so that when they leave, they're equipped to put some of those ideas into practice. So if you could, please, because I know that was the first book before the Black Tax.
Right. So let me, so I'll talk about both, right? But so I heard everything you said, right? They don't have the money yet and all that kind of stuff. But let me tell you what they do have. This is the beauty, right? This is why I love to talk with young people. You know what I mean? Because they're not wedded to what is right now.
That's right.
People have been through this construct, and too many people have made peace with it. They've accepted how things are. They don't reject how things are and are totally focused on a new reality. Young people, yeah, you know, this isn't necessarily how it has to be, right? They're not wedded to it. The other thing is they have 50 or 60 years ahead of them, right? That's going to be transformative. The other aspect of it is you're part of a program that's identifying super high potential young people that are going to be in leadership positions on a go-forward basis, right? They're going to be cleaning up this mess, right? That was made for them, that they're inheriting. So, you know, I love it. And if you're starting off with this knowledge and perspective and not getting it many decades later, right, with all kinds of opportunities that have been lost to actually practice it and put it in place in their businesses and the influence that they will have with other businesses, you know, that's why I love this, right? Like I love when I, you know, lecture at different universities and stuff like that. A couple of days ago, I was lecturing at Cornell, some other places. You know, this is the power, right, of youth. Invention and innovation typically comes from two places. It comes from people who are young, and it comes from people who are new to fields. Both cases mean you have not accepted the current state. That's where innovation kind of comes from, and that's the power, right, of youth and the transformation that comes from it. So I just love that. You guys will have the money, right? You will have the power. Like all of that is coming. It might be hard to believe, particularly on the path that you are right now and the support that you have. With everyone who's in this program and you know your parents who encourage you to be in this program, you're much better positioned, right, than the average person to achieve great things. Okay, so let me talk a little bit about CPR for the Soul, which is the other book that I wrote. And the books are complementary. The Black Tax, at the end of the day, is the strongest possible case for commercializing Black business, for doing business with Black business, for anybody, for Black people, Asian people, you know, Latino people, Middle Eastern, white people, it doesn't matter. It's the strongest possible case that can be written for that. And you're seeing a lot of that, you know, play out. At the end of the day, the providing of capital, the creation of more jobs through entrepreneurship, more businesses through entrepreneurship, is going to lead to better and much more abundant jobs, right? Which is terrific and critical and essential. That's going to lead to something that's called earned income, which is wonderful. We need to have much more of that than we have right now. But we have to have an ability to turn earned income into retained income, right? And because of the history of the experience of Black people in this country, we don't have the inheritances that are going to be coming from one family to the next, right? That's much lower. So what you're going to have is how much you make, your earned income, and how much of that you're able to retain so you can apply it to wealth building you know, ideas. So CPR for the Soul is it's really a double acronym. SOUL stands for Stewardship, Ownership, and Legacy. The idea is that stewardship leads to ownership, and ownership ultimately leads to legacy, right? And we got to apply CPR to that. We got to resuscitate that level of thinking. And stewardship is, how do I manage my limited resources to their highest and best use to drive cash flow? Positive cash flow, which is some money left over after all my expenses, because positive cash flow is at the foundation of everything. If you don't have cash flow, there's no house, there's no business, there's no colleges, there's no nothing. So we have to be able to do that. How do we put ourselves in a position where we can limit our exposure to debt? Or if we are in debt, we can put together an effective plan that can slowly get us out of that situation and help us to stay out of it, right? With the idea being ownership is being in a state where you are the only one who has claims to your assets, right? Because you cannot leave that which is not yours. And then legacy is a 3-point idea. The first is putting yourself in a position so that in the future, whether it's your decision or somebody else's, you can retire with dignity, so that you can leave an inheritance for your children's children, according to Proverbs, right? A good person is supposed to be able to do that. Once you start thinking multi-generation, it's a totally different perspective, and it's incredibly powerful. There's a third part of that, which is we should be able to do more than kind of hope and pray. Like if during your walk of life, you see a need that really speaks to you and you feel convicted to do something about it, you should be able to take action when it comes to that. You shouldn't be able to kind of hope and pray that things get better for people. You're called to do more than that, right? And to take action means you have to have the resources. And to have the resources means that you have to have a plan. And to have had the plan means that you have to have been executing it, right? So we put together a whole framework, right? Soul is a framework to help people be in a position to do those things, to manage their resources, to drive cash flow, to eliminate, reduce, and stay out of debt, and to be able to have legacy, right? Which are those three parts that I talked about. And I kind of wrote and designed the book for this purpose, because most of the financial advice that's out there is what I call allocation type advice, which is you have a bunch of resources. You got 700,000, you got 750,000, you got $1 million, you got some resources. How do I now allocate that? How do I put that in different places, right, where it can earn a return in a diversified way, so I can help create intergenerational wealth? That's terrific, but that generally is not the problem with which most Black people are dealing with. Most Black people are dealing with what I call an accumulation problem, which is how do I get to that point in the first place, right? Because it's much less likely that I'll get there through inheritance and all those kinds of things, right? So a lot of this is how do you manage your resources in a way to maximize cash flow in a repeatable, conservative, executable way. And to do that, you have to have a framework, right, that you employ, on a daily, weekly, monthly, kind of long-term, basis. And those are the things that we put down and that we put in place. It's tied to kind of our, our scriptural belief systems, right? Because, large numbers of Black people are self-professed Christians, and leaving a legacy is incredibly important, and ownership is incredibly important, stewardship is incredibly important. And the idea is, how do I now do it where I am, not some imaginary place in the future? And we really go into to those respects, and it goes into detail on, on budgeting, an enormously unsexy, kind of idea. Everybody has a budget, nobody uses it. You know what I mean? Evidently, ballers don't have budgets, which is one of the most crazy statements like ever made, in the financial world. But it's like, if you want to be in a position of financial independence, right, then you have to maximize your resources so that your assets are generating enough to replace any salary, right, that you would ever need. That allows you to make decisions based on principle, things which you feel, believe to be right, versus pragmatism, what you got to do to make a dollar, right, to cover the costs of tomorrow. And then, I walk through lots of detail, and I tie it to things we already believe. For example, I think ownership is so critical and so important. I'll often ask people, like, how many times does, ownership or derivatives of that word show up, right, in scripture? And most people don't know, and it's close to 700 times, right? The idea of that which is important is repeated, right? Ownership, all those permutations show up constantly, right? So that's an idea that's replicated. Borrowing, how many times does that show up, right? And it's extremely limited amount of time, right? It's less than 70 times that it shows up. When it shows up, it's typically as a curse. But where are we? Are we more on the ownership spectrum? Are we more on the borrowing spectrum? Right? Do we understand the difference between those things, and to what extent does it sacrifice legacy if we go down those paths? It really helps us to think deeply about, should I invest in this thing today, or should I invest in something else so I can be where I want to be, in the future?
Absolutely.
That's a quick overview of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I personally couldn't agree more, because in our BOSS program, we have 6 pillars, and one of those pillars is economically boss. And within every pillar, the boss has a different acronym that pertains to the pillar. And in economically boss, the B stands for budget. We try to instruct the kids, the importance of having that written budget. And I'm a fan of the zero-based budget, where you give every dollar a job before you even get it. The O stands for ownership. We can't, advocate enough on being an owner and not being a borrower. The S stands for savvy, and I think being savvy with your money will ties into stewardship as well. Being a good steward of your resources, and then the final S stands for saving, and being able to save and invest your money so that you can create that long-term growth and legacy. So that's really good for the kids to hear some of those same things being replicated by yourself.
Yeah, no, there's complete alignment. When I give talks on stewardship and the like I'll go through the car buying process, right? And I'll show people what that looks like at different credit levels. And it's terrifying when you see it. Like, I've had people approach me in tears afterwards, right? Because they're like, everything you said happened when I walked into that dealership, right? And the difference could be anywhere from another 10 to 30,000 that you're spending on a car that's totally unnecessary. I'm not saying you can't have that car. I'm saying we can do these things, right, in really thorough economic ways where we're not exploited. And unless you understand that, it's very easy, right? Why is credit important? And people are gonna, bog me down on credit. Well, let me show you why, right? Let me show you that there's something that's called super prime. And let me show you the interest rates associated with who super prime people are. And let me show you what this thing called deep subprime. And let me show you what the interest rates are with those folks. And these are the vast majority of people, by the way, right? It's terrific. I mean, it's terrifying. And let's look at, over the life of that loan, the difference in what those people had to pay and the impact that now had in legacy, right? So, and the conversations that you will have when you walk into the dealer, they already got a plan for you. The issue is, do you have a plan for yourself? And the way this market works is it's based on asymmetric information. Somebody knows more about something than somebody else. And if your resources scale faster than your ability to handle your resources, you will be separated from them. You have to ensure that your wisdom, knowledge, and understanding scale at a faster rate than your resources, right? And we've seen that with athletes and entertainers and lottery winners and all that kind of stuff. That's exactly what happens when your resources scale faster than your ability to handle it. The principle of the market is that you have to be separated from it. That's just how it's going to flow, right? And you do not want to be a mark, right?
No.
Absolutely, I couldn't put it better myself. Actually.
Oh my god!
And when you mentioned and when you mentioned those interest rates over the life of a loan, 1 to 2% can be devastating. Let alone the difference between a 10 to a 15%. And
differential.
Absolutely. And one thing that I've seen, and especially with the student loan crisis, we have some of these students who, actually most of them, the vast majority, will be going on to college. And, with the student loan epidemic being the way that it is currently, let's say you have a student loan of excess of like $50,000, and then we're making minimum payments on like a high interest rate, that interest rate could grow faster than you can pay it off. So then you're just trapped in perpetuity. So I think having these types of conversations can be extremely impactful, especially for the young kids on this call.
It's super critical, right? And the issue of student loans is actually at all levels, because just because you have more money doesn't mean you're better at handling your money. The only thing that more money means is that you have more capacity to absorb stupid mistakes. That's right. So $50,000 mistake is a painful lesson learned, but you fine if you got significant money. For somebody who doesn't, that's a mistake that it might be hard for them to ever be able to recover from. But yet you make the mistake. What we want to do is make sure that people are better empowered in how that they can, handle, manage, and grow their resources. So there are people who have significant resources, and they're approaching, college the way 2 generations approached, which is, don't worry about it, just go, everything will work out. Yeah, but when they had that mindset, you could go to Yale working a part-time job. You know what I'm saying? Like in 1970, Yale was like $4,000 a year or something crazy like that. It's 70,000 plus. You have to have a plan, right? Like, corporations aren't going to train you up anymore where you could just be like, oh, I'm going to study whatever I want, then they'll just train me accordingly, right? So we've got to be really focused on how do you get the best possible education at no cost. There are people who are willing to put money on the table, right, for your brain power and perhaps for the brawn that you bring to the table in terms of athletic capabilities and whatnot, if they're willing to do that, fine, then utilize those resources. But it should be the highest quality education that gets you closer to the career that you're most interested in at no cost. That's the goal. And then there's different paths that we can figure out, that we can architect to be able to get you there, right? But unless you have that, there are people who feel like it's honorable. I'm super excited that, you know, it cost 70 grand to go there. They gave me a $20,000 scholarship, so I'm only paying 50,000 a year times 4 years, $200,000. I'm like, that's insane. You could study that anywhere, right? Take that 200,000, right, and go a different route. We can architect what that can look like for you to pay nothing, and then take that 200,000 and put that into the business for that young person if they want to go into it, or put that into their graduate degree, or put that into them having an experiential, you know, assignment somewhere, right? Maybe they go to Zanzibar, right? And they apply solar green technology to help, you know, farmers and stuff like that. But, you know, you maximize the opportunity to go to the best university that you possibly can go to at the lowest cost. We cannot have our young people starting out in massive debt, and that's precisely what is happening, to the tune of $100 billion a year of incremental borrowing to go to university. It doesn't make sense. We have to have plans and strategies in place to absolutely offset that.
Shawn, it's Bobby Franklin again. I spent 17 years volunteering at the high school in my neighborhood, and I had hundreds of this type of conversation with parents about their children, and making that decision and understanding that if you're gonna go into debt 6 figures, and you have the ability to give them 6 figures up front to get involved in whatever particular business that they're interested in. I mean, what's the biggest benefit at the end of the journey? Because a lot of kids go to school and get educational programs that don't materialize financial wealth after they finish. So it's you know, as far as I'm concerned, it's wasted resources. And most decisions that's made by young people when it comes to colleges is what they see in marketing, what their peers are saying that they should be at, or from watching athletic venues where, you know, they have a successful program and you want to go there to be associated with that, rather than understanding the value of what is it going to take for you? Well, how much money is it going to take for you to spend to get what you need to maximize the earnings on the backside of it? And it's a difficult conversation to have as parents with children. But I tell them, hey, you know what? Where else in this process do we give 16, 17, 18-year-old individuals the decision-making process in making something for a decision that financially can mean $250,000? Nothing else, nothing else. So, you know, you have to hold steadfast and be firm in the fact that, hey, give them the information that they need when they need it, because they truly do not know at that point in time in their life what this decision they're going to make at 16, 17, and 18 is going to cripple them for the next 20, 30, 40 years of their life.
Yeah. I once got asked to come speak at a large camp, right? It was an athletic camp, and they had kids from all over there. They said, hey, we would love for you to come here and be a keynote speaker and tell the kids about the importance of SATs and ACTs and all that stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And I was like, nope, I'm not coming. They're like, what, wait a minute, what do you mean? Like, well, you're all about the kids, and you know what I mean? You do all this stuff. We've been a part of stuff, like we've been a part of an organization that's given over $2 million, right, to Black high school kids that have gone on to university, right? But what do you mean you're not coming? I said, if you want me to come there to tell them to do more stuff, I'm not coming, right? Because I can tell you that they think they know what they're doing, right? And you keep adding stuff onto the list. Now, I will come there to tell them what's in it for them, right? I'll come there and I'll talk about that. You know what I mean? The approach has to be different. You can make whatever decision that you want. I'm never going to argue with you if you say, I don't think French is necessary. I can actually give you an argument as to why it's necessary. Or you could say, well, why is trigonometry necessary? You might be right. You're probably not going to deal with it on a go-forward basis. It's not the point. The point is, why do they give it to you? It's that they just want you to demonstrate that you're able to master these concepts, that you're able to work in teams, that you're able to figure out how to do it. You know what I'm saying? And you do it to the best of your ability, and you move on. You know what I mean? What's in it for you? They will pay for high performing students. I say, high performing students, right, get the privilege of being financed, and those who are not get the privilege of borrowing, right? Now, I'm like, if people are willing to put the money on the table for you, let's talk about what that looks like. I'm never going to tell you it's easy, because it's not easy. Anything that's large and worth it isn't ever going to be easy. But there are organizations and universities and scholarships that are there for top performing students, especially if you are Black or minority, female, all of this kind of stuff, because we have so much exposure to negative environments we don't have a high enough concentration of these super high performers. That takes time, it takes energy, it takes work, but they're willing to finance you, fund you, cover the check, up to $70,000 for whatever school you want to go to. If they're willing to put that money on the table at 16, 17, 18, whenever you go to university, that's $280,000 over a 4-year period, then take it. But to get that, you have to put in the hours, right, to do it. And you don't have to do it because you think that, trigonometry is critical to your future. Just execute it and get it done. There's a bunch of stuff that's not necessary to your future, but there's a bunch of things that are transferable, which is your ability to master a topic that you're not familiar with, that you don't necessarily love, but you can use it for something else, and you can do it relatively quickly, and you can work with other people to shorten your time frame and whatnot. You can apply that to many different things, and people value those general kind of concepts because they believe it's going to help you in your career. So execute on it, and if they're willing to put tens of thousands of dollars, right, on the table for you, then take everything off the table. From a negotiating standpoint, you never leave anything on the table. So if they're putting it on the table, put in the work, energy, and effort to take everything off the table, right? When you're a senior and you've done like a great job, generally in local communities, there's probably between 5,000 and 10,000 of local money just for you, right? Between your church and the local businesses and the local nonprofits and whatever, just for you, that's money on the table. Nobody else in America compete for it. It's just for you. It's just for that local area. All that should be off the table, right? And some of that stuff is repeat money. So you're getting that over a 4-year period. Execute and take all of that on the table. That's reducing your bill by $5,000 or $10,000, right? There are other scholarships that are out there. Does it take work? It does. It takes hours to write an essay, and it's thorough, and read the question properly and whatever. But if you do it, you could earn $25,000. When have you had a better way of allocating 10 hours, right, to make 25 grand that you don't got to pay back, that these people are putting in front of you? I'm saying that's what's in it for you, right? So take all that on the table. If you believe having that money is worth it, then you might believe now that putting in the effort to get a shot at doing it is worth it. That's kind of what's in it for you. And we can talk about, that conversation. That's what's worth you saying, you know what, now I'm going to do this instead of doing this kind of other activity, because I see where this is going to take me, right? And there's a big difference between, a person who doesn't get to school, or a person who makes it and just kind of gets through, and a person who does exceptionally well. And the difference are in orders of millions of dollars over your working career, right? Yeah. The difference between a high performing person, a low performing person, for whatever reasons, can be $2 to $4 million over your career. That's going to change the architecture of the problems that you're dealing with, right? In a heartbeat. And then the final thing that I say, and I'll say it, with our little ones all the time, who are not as little anymore, is whenever a friend of them irritates them, or maybe they're not a friend, right? I'm always like, do you want to work for that person? Would you love to work for that person? They're like, hell no, I wouldn't want to work for that person. And I was like, well, that's why you got to deliver the goods. Because you might wind up working for that person, right? And people who are young and problematic grow into people who are older and problematic. And at that point in the future, you got no choice. Now you got to swallow your pride and kind of take orders. I'm interested in that. So just put in the work. So you minimize the chance, right, that you'll be in that type of situation. And it's a totally different type of relationship you have with people when you have a strong financial position. You can operate from what you believe in, not what you got to do.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. Well, Dr. Bishop will tell you one of the fundamental things that they teach these young people is, hey, you have to be willing to pay the price to get where you want to go. Nothing is free. And you know what? If you're not willing to make the sacrifice and the dedication to achieving it, you most likely won't get there.
Yeah, but when you do, it's actually quite lucrative.
Oh, yes, it is.
You know what I mean? Like you're not traveling over a desert to get a glass of vinegar. You know what I'm saying? Like on the other side of this thing is a life that you're going to be very happy with, right? That other people are not going to have, right? And what you could do with that life is you can make the world better for other people who don't have that. Now you can align your desire with your ability. A lot of people got a good heart. They got no ability to execute on what they believe in, right? And you need economic resources to do that.
Well, I'm living proof of that, coming from a family of one parent and 8 siblings, and the power of education.
Yeah, it's transformative.
Absolutely. Yeah, Mr. Rochester, do you have some sort of podcast or other ways to like follow you on some of the things you're saying? Do you ever collaborate with like other people in like the Black financial space in order to like keep on hearing some of this stuff?
I don't have a podcast, although I've been asked to create one. I'm on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn. I think that's like where old people are. I don't think young people are hip to that kind of game anymore. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Twitter. Instagram and Twitter is Black Tax. Facebook is Shawn Rochester. LinkedIn, which you guys will be on in a couple of years, as Shawn Rochester. I have a website which is www.blacktax.com, where we have some information as well. And those are the kind of the primary ways.
Absolutely. Well, I don't want to hold you for too long. You've been up here for about an hour and 45 minutes. How long were you planning on staying with us this morning?
Yeah, I mean, I was open to continuing the dialogue if folks wanted to continue the dialogue. So
great. Do any of the youth on the call, does anybody have a question about anything really? Gabriel, Noe, Jordan Simmons, y'all have any questions for Mr. Rochester?
Clarifying questions.
Mark Williams.
There's a lot to digest, huh?
Don't be shy. Safe space. Won't be painful.
Isaiah, you got anything? We were talking about some of this stuff earlier.
I have a question.
All right.
So like I watch the news and stuff, and like I hear people and I hear what people are saying and stuff about Black Lives Matter and all that stuff. And like what you were talking about before, is it like an example of like, since we weren't in slavery, they like enslaved us systematically. So is that like systematic oppression? Is that a thing?
It is absolutely systematic oppression, right? In a very economic, extractive way, right? The point of what is important for people to understand is that slavery and colonialism is economic. It was done for an economic reason and an economic purpose. You discover a new land. Land isn't worth anything unless you can apply labor and capital to it, right? So they moved people in horrible conditions that we can talk about in detail later if you would want, right? From the continent of Africa and brought them here and other places in the New World for an economic purpose and reason. And then you have to justify that because it was a horrific thing to do. And you have to live with yourself. And you justify that based on the notion of racism, right? And the idea of superiority, right? But the purpose, the reason, the underlying impact is economic. The ideologies and the constructs that follow are just how you justify it, how you live with yourself. And you do that by saying one group is more superior than another group and all this kind of nonsense, right? So it is oppression without question, but it's oppression for the purpose of economic extraction, right? Specifically, in all cases and spaces, right? Where these practices were put in place.
Yeah, I'm learning, thank you. I'm learning about this stuff in like history and stuff, right? Because I'm an 11th grader. And they're talking about like most people think like I was telling videos like most people think that like slaves are just like black people were grabbed from Africa and just dragged over here, but like the higher ups in Africa were selling their people to the U.S. and they will bring them on ships.
Yeah, people, Africans absolutely participated in the sale of people, right? That's a 200-year legacy. They're also responding to market prices, right? Which is there was a price put on people. Europeans also pumped 20 million plus guns into West Africa to flame wars and intentions so that people would attack each other, and then gave them money for captives. If you put the right price in any community, they will snatch each other and sell each other. That is a human issue and condition that they try to isolate and make it a black issue and condition. You put the right price on people, they will sell their own family, right? So, and yes, it happens, but we need to understand the context. Now, I could say, was that worth, once they were on those ships, the 6 million lives that are at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean that are black people because of that? Was it worth that? I'm originally from Barbados, right, which was a central area in the legacy of that. And more people were arguably brought to Barbados than were brought to this place we call North America. Yet we only had 300,000 people. There's 4 million black people, 45 million black people here. Life expectancy under those conditions in Barbados was 7 years. Was that the African, right? That did that? You know what I mean? That it's a horrible institution that is very difficult to deal with it in an honest way. So what people do, and adults do, is that they deflect, right? Or they don't even have the conversation in the first place, which is why, unfortunately, we don't see a lot of this stuff in the curriculum. And in Texas, they were saying that black people were brought over as some kind of workers, right? I mean, it was just a fantasy, right? That's just not the case. It's easier to help people believe that so that they don't actually have to deal with the horrors of the institution.
Yeah.
Thank you for that question, though. Any other brave souls?
Thank you for the answer.
You're more than welcome. I know you guys are itching. Who's gonna be next?
Well, Shawn, I heard you earlier talk about, you showed a slide on Albert Einstein, right?
Yep. He's a friend of the people, by the way.
Yeah, that's exactly the feeling.
He's a friend of the people. Yep.
But I also remember something that he said, that imagination was greater than knowledge. He said that your imagination can overcome any hardship, anything from the past. And so when I thought about what you, with that slide and what Einstein also said, I thought about what Mr. Franklin talked about LeBron James. And I thought about when LeBron James first left Cleveland, Ohio, and had that program, The Choice, and he went to the Miami Heat. I had a local news program come and interview me, and I guess they was going to, I don't know what they kind of response they wanted, but they asked me how did I feel about him leaving, and I said, you know what, I got one problem. We never found out how this person coming from a single mom, a teenage mom, was able to come to one of the worst teams in the history of teams and turn into an elite team. How he was able to do all the things he's done. And when I started to extracting his and looking at his life, one of the things obviously he had as a young man growing up in the projects with very little, was he had imagination. He had a vision. And so somebody talked about Fisher Island, but obviously that guy had a vision. And I think that what we have to understand, that when you talk about vision, imagination, them is birth gifts, right? God gives us these human intelligences, And one is vision, right? Which is imagination. And what is vision? To me, vision is you looking at the potential of not only what you could be, but what the circumstances could be. Then another one of them intelligences is discipline. What's discipline? Having the commitment to bring that to fruition. And then you talked about it earlier. Another one is passion, right? Having something that motivates you, excites you enough to say, hey, I'm going to stay at it. And then the conscious to saying, hey, what I do is right. And then getting prompted to do that. Now, I say this to say what? That if one can, we all can. But regardless of what the circumstances is, if Mr. Einstein is who they say he is, then maybe he's right. Maybe in order for us to overcome this, we got to have a vision of us working together, as you say. It has to be the vision. Maybe we need a vision of I'm more than just a so-called nigger or because a lot of times, we hear right in our own home, boy, you ain't nothing. Your daddy wasn't nothing. His daddy wasn't nothing, right? So what vision are we painting there, right? Totally opposed to the vision that Everett is trying to paint with these young guys now, and the discipline to say, hey, listen, I'm going to bring that into fruition. So we teach them about, as Mr. Franklin said, paying that price, because there's a price for us to get this done. Would you agree?
I agree.
There's a price. And once we determine that price and we commit to pay, let me tell you the piece that we don't talk about. What about this spiritual piece? You talk about research. Research says everything is moving. Wherever there's an effect, there's a cause, and the cause is greater still. So what's the cause of all of this, right? And there's a spiritual piece that says this, and if you believe it or not, it's this, that if you're sleeping under the homeless bridge in Long Beach, and you have a vision and a desire for something better, the universe has no option but to bring people, ideas, and thoughts in your path. I don't think this is no coincidence that we're here today, that you're here giving us this information, because the folks here, we have drawn like-minded people here. And I say that to say that we cannot ever forget this spiritual piece, because that's going to, if we don't tap into that piece, then we'll be looking with our eyes. And just like LeBron James rose from the ghettos of Akron to now, they say he just bought him a house for 36 million. See what I'm saying? Then if you look with your eyes, you can't see the vision. See, this book you wrote, it was from something that existed in your mind before it ever became a hard copy. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And so I'm saying that with the issues, the pain, we need to now start sharing with these folks that just like that book became a fruition and manifested because you had a vision. Because I know this, there's no way the black tax was put in front of Google without some struggle, without some prices being paid, without you having not only the vision, but you had the discipline, I'm sure, right, to bring it to fruition. And there was something inside you called passion that excited, motivated, right, you to do it. And then there had to be a conscious piece to say, listen, this is the thing to do. And not only is the thing to do, but hey, you got prompted to do it. So I'm saying this to say that, say what? A lot of times we don't got to reinvent the wheel. Find somebody else who already do it. Find out what they're thinking, how they did it, and let's emulate them, because there are examples out there. And I'm thinking about yourself and LeBron James. I'm saying, hey, if we can tap into how you got it done, then watch this. If one can, we all can.
Right. I agree. I'm a big proponent of working models and understanding the backstory, the how. I don't want to hear about the triumphant person who came from nothing and now is something. I can't replicate that. What am I going to do with that? Right? So we got to understand the steps, the C spot run version, right, of it. Now, is there vision? Yes. I do not accept the current state.
That's right.
I think that when we look into the mirror, we are not seeing our true selves. We are seeing the image like in a fun house. It's distorted. This is not who we are. This is who other people think that we are, right? And they invest accordingly. I don't accept it. Now, I've been fortunate to have an extraordinary education in a place where this notion of Black excellence is very normal. I wrote a whole piece of this in my blog that Black excellence is redundant, right? Black is excellent unless there's something outside that is imposing itself on it that makes it other than that, right? But I had the privilege of having that experience, right? Whereas many people don't. I worked really hard. I've been trained really well. And if I can do deals and put hundreds of millions of dollars in place for shareholder value, I can analyze facts and I can make sense of what seems to not make sense, right? But I apply this notion of soul that I write about. I'm not just out here swinging. I handle my money very well, right? I own this company. I've turned down book deals, right? I'm not selling my intellectual property. I'm not taking orders from nobody. You don't get to tell me when it's done. You don't know enough. I'm the one who is enlightening, right? Now, if you want to be in that position, you're gonna have to work really hard to be in that position because it's not designed for those outcomes. I studied this space, and with the internet and YouTube and all that, everything you could possibly ever want to do. If you guys want to build a rocket tomorrow, there's somebody on YouTube who's explaining to you how to do it. Everything is out there. I studied this space. Right. I know that book publishing and whatnot is not profitable, but I'm a cash flow management expert. I can find the most profitable version, period, end of story. I'm not guessing at anything. I understand the contracts. I understand how it works. And I design it accordingly. I know the puts and takes, and I know the price that I need to pay and all those kinds of things, right? We can put together a plan and a process to create an environment that allows us to act on principle. But you got to have the resources in place. And if that thing is not coming in by inheritance, then you got to generate it. And for you to be able to generate it, you got to retain the money, right? Knowing that you will never get DAP for driving a Civic. But if you're pushing a Benz or whatever, you're gonna get all the DAP in the world. And you have to learn not to judge those things on the exterior because you don't know who owns that. One of the things I tell people is you can see possession, but you cannot see ownership, right? I've been to Paris, I've been to Milan, I've been to all them places. I've been there first class and I ain't spent a nickel on it. Now, if you decide that you want to go toe to toe with me, you're gonna drop 45,000. I didn't spend 45,000. I didn't spend anything, right? There's levels to this. You know what I mean? You can get what you want, but I don't know why you think you need to pay retail and be proud of that. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. You can put those structures in place. It's the same thing, whether you apply it to your business, whether you apply it to your family, whether you apply it to your college education, everything's the same, right? And how you allocate your resources, because at the end of the day, every day you should be working your way out the game. Every day.
Every day.
Wow.
Every day you are one step closer. What do I mean by that? What do you mean by out the game? You make it whatever number it is that you think you need to make. I don't know what it is. Whatever that's for you and your family.
So
right? Then you have to work your way into an asset position that is slowly creating and generating enough to that number. And at that point, you don't got to work for nobody at any point. I have different conversations with people than other folks do, right? I spoke to Amazon twice this year, right? They asked me to put my book on their platform, which I was very thankful and grateful, and it was a wonderful thing and all that kind of stuff. Like it's different when you have a solid, financial foundation. Most people don't. You can look like you're doing well. I don't make no assumptions. I don't know if that person owns that car or if People Bank own it. I don't know if they own that house. I don't even know if they own a shirt on their back. Because if you got credit card debt, you don't own that shirt.
That's it. Right.
Right. There's levels to this. I even get to speaking about any of that. What I'm saying though is you could design that into it. And being young, you guys have time.
That's right.
I know it don't feel like it, but you guys can kill this game, man. I'm so excited for you, right? With this knowledge and this information and your skill set and your hard work, your determination. You know what I'm saying? Oh my goodness. I'm more excited for you than you can imagine.
So,
well, Shawn,
go ahead, Bob.
I said, Shawn, I tell people all the time that credit is a very powerful tool to have, only if you understand how to use it and not be used by it.
Yeah.
And, and everything that you just talked about it because it's funny. I have continual conversations with people about the same subject that you just discussed.
Yeah, I listen, man. I understand it. I also coach and advise people on that, so I understand things from the inside out. Like
So
I advise people who advise people about money.
right. So,
You know what I mean?
Sean,
Don't be fooled by the suit.
yeah.
No, okay, I hear you.
These
Hey,
right? Not everybody knows what
you
they're
might have
doing.
rented that suit.
Exactly.
Hey, but Sean, let me share this with you. In Stephen Covey's book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People,
yep.
I think the 5th habit is win-win. So we want to make sure that every one of our speakers come here, they leave here with just as much as they gave. Let me share with you what I see. Greater than this book that you wrote, it's the blueprint of how you got there and what you went through. Because now you're talking this boss stuff. Going the extra mile, learning from defeat, having a commitment to excellence because we realize that being good is only admission to the game. It won't sustain you, right? And so I share that with you to say the book is just a byproduct of Shawn Rochester. And because you got that stuff in you, man, it's going to be some more books. The best is yet to come because the same principles you used to write that book, Mr. Franklin used to do 38 years inside one of the top corporations in America. It's the same principles that Everett Glenn used to become one of the first super agents in the United States. It's the same principle LeBron James used to come out of Akron, come a few miles up the street to Cleveland. We had never been on national TV. He got to Cleveland. We was on there every day because he got that Shawn Rochester in him. So don't forget, hey, that's the deal with you now. Oh yeah, that book just a byproduct. You got some more books coming, man. We need to dissect you.
No, I appreciate it, man. That's why I'm so excited, because if you now put resources on top of people, especially young people who have those principles, it's a game changer.
Yeah.
That's what's so exciting. It's a game. Sometimes you can put endless amounts of money in somebody's hand and nothing will happen. It's the saddest thing in the world to me. If you can be dissected to a point where people have no concern about putting endless money in your hand, what does that say? That means nothing will change. Like you have no focus on changing anything beyond your immediate ecosystem. I could be, if I'm happy with how things are, I can sleep at night putting resources in your hands.
Wow.
But if you have people with a different set of principles and a view that ultimately is good for everyone, everything that we're talking about here, none of this is zero sum. None of this is exclusively good just for us and our families. You know what I'm saying? This is good for everyone, regardless of how other people interpret it. And we're not waiting, and we're not interested in their permission, right? By the way, right? Like that becomes powerful. You put money, you enable young people like that, and now you put the 100 million in their hands. What's that going to be? That's going to be $1 billion.
That's what we got here, game changers. These young guys, Mr. Franklin and I, we talk about it. I said, we don't increase our bucket list, and that is, can we be around just to see what happens? Exactly. Because man, these some bad guys on this call, and I think they just grown because of your presence. But I have another question. They just gave out, they talking this stimulus check. I know just 5-6 months ago, they gave 100 million, billions of dollars to our people, and I don't see nothing change. So what do you think of? I mean, what happened? That $1,200, did any? How much you think came our way? Did we share any?
So now I have to opine on a bigger thing here, right? Probably won't have enough time.
I don't want to do that to you.
Listen. This is a gigantic wealth transfer, right? And it's a huge hustle. This is not advantageous for Black folks.
No.
Firstly, $500 billion was allocated to corporations. Okay, we don't know anything about that money. We don't know nothing. Right? And that clearly was not Black enterprise. And I'm not saying anybody shouldn't get anything. I just don't want Black folks getting left out. You know what I mean? Right? Yeah. So and we advised like our clients on how to position themselves to maximize these resources, because this was going to be horrific what we were going to go through, right? So when are we giving out like the PPP, Paycheck Protection Program money, the first, several hundreds of billions of dollars? They prioritize larger small business. They call them small business. By definition, a small business is a business that has 500 employees per location.
Yeah.
Okay, that's an 80 to $100 million business per location. I mean, it's just like, guys, knock it off. That's not really a small business, right? But that's how they define it. And when they gave out the money, those businesses were prioritized a week ahead. We're only going to give money to them first. By the way, the vast majority of Black businesses, 96%, have no employees whatsoever.
Right.
They're micro businesses by definition, right? So they put the Heisman to all those businesses, right? And on the first 7 days are allocated just to them. Day 14, they run out of all the resources. So when the smaller businesses now went to the well, there was nothing left. Then they had to pass like another thing. It wasn't designed to get to Black enterprise because it wasn't specific. You had to have well-established relationships with your bank.
With the
you know what I mean? And all these, there was no design to get it there, right? This wound up being extremely helpful to many other business and enterprises. The idea that $1,200 is sufficient is absurd in and of its space. Now, adding to the unemployment insurance and expanding that to people who weren't formally covered by it, right? Gig workers, Uber people, all the folks who were doing 1099, that was helpful. That's a good thing if you can get on it, right? Even getting the checks out to people. I mean, that means they have to know where you are. People move around all the different time and all this kind of stuff, right? It's underinvested in Black people without question. 400,000 Black businesses by April 30th had to shut down because of all this stuff, right? How many of those are actually going to be able to reopen? How many of our businesses are in the restaurant and retail space? How many were in transportation, were overrepresented, right? Which were affected by all this kind of stuff. How many of them had the capital in the first place? Black business was missing about $9 billion of capital pre-COVID. Yeah. You know what I mean? You need liquidity, you need cash, right? How many families have the resources to be able to get through this? How much pain is now in the system that we don't even know anything about because the media ain't reporting on it, and the suffering that is happening right now for Black children who are 10 times more exposed to poverty, who's working on our behalf. Before COVID, in 30 years, the average Black family, 50% of Black families were going to have zero or negative net worth. That's a national security event. That's before COVID. That's what was already happening. Who's working on our behalf? Who's speaking specifically about PhD and their policies and plans and programs? You know what I'm saying? I don't see it, right? And when you don't see it and you don't accept it, then you start to do something about it, right? And people have to respond to it. And that winds up being beneficial to folks because sometimes people just want to do it because they want their job. They're not passionate about it. They want to be the council person. Fine, be it. I love it. Whatever, I want you to be happy. I just need to see PhD, right? You want to be governor? Fine, I got you. Show me PhD. You want to be mayor? Fine, I got you. Show me PhD. Whatever you want, I got you. Show me PhD. No PhD, right? And if you show me that and then you could deliver on it, you show me first term. You deliver, second term. You deliver again, third term. You don't deliver,
out.
We're talking to somebody else. It's not personal, right? It's nothing. I'm sure you're a great person. I'm sure you love your family. I'm sure they love you, your neighbors. I'm not interested in none of that. Are your policies going to create, are they stimuluses for jobs, business, and capital in the Black community? They are or they are not. And that's all I'm interested in. And that's what we should be interested in. We should be clear about that. And people should address those needs. And these stimulative plans that are put in place should address those needs very, very specifically. You just can't just put money out into the ecosystem and be like, first come, first serve, right? I mean, that's absurd, right? We have 2% of the wealth. We're 1/5 as likely to get an inheritance. When the inheritance comes, it's 1/10 of the size, and only 20% of it goes to increase wealth in our community. The idea that we're all in this together is absurd. Anyway, I digress. I get passionate about this stuff. You know what I mean?
I have a question. Right now on the California ballot, they have Prop 16 that we can vote for, which is, from what I understand, is similar to affirmative action. And I wanted to know, do you think that if they were to enact that that prop or that law in effect again, do you think that that would be helpful to our communities?
I'm not familiar with Prop 16, so it's something that's going to increase affirmative action.
Right. It's I guess in essence, it's like you know, invoking affirmative action in the workplace again. And I don't know the answer to it. That's why, you know, I just was hoping maybe you could shed some light on that if you think that
Sure.
that was helpful back then, and do you think that if they were to invoke that law again, do you think that it would be helpful to our people?
Yeah, so I would say, so I'm only going to be able to speak at a very, very high level because I haven't read the proposition, and I'm actually the kind of person who, like, I read that CARES Act. It's 880 pages. You know what I'm saying? So, but I haven't read this kind of prop thing. So I'll just talk about, I guess, affirmative action at a high level. So the first thing I would say is we have to have a framework, a basis by which we judge whether or not something is helpful to our communities, right? And I would say that that framework should be PhD. So show me the jobs, business, and capital that whatever it is these people are considering is doing. So if I would look at Prop 16 or any other thing from the perspective of, at the end of the day, what is it doing in terms of stimulating job creation and business development, right, in the Black community? And is it doing that or not? And it's hard for me to say because I haven't read it. Then there's the concept of affirmative action. So, which is what exactly do people mean by that when they're talking about it today? Because there's what was meant by it when it was put in place, right? Which generally is this you know, idea of, I think of it was meant to be able to create opportunities for Black people to participate in the workplace and the educational system, because they have been systematically, intentionally excluded from those places, right? It was not written specifically about Black people, right? It's generally about people who are kind of, you know, marginalized. I think what I'll just talk about, you know, I guess affirmative action in general. You know, over the 60 years for which that thing is in place, people associate that with just Black people exclusively. The major beneficiaries of those initiatives have not been Black people.
That's right. And women.
Right.
It's been women.
So you're talking about white women.
Women.
And you're talking about non-Black so-called minorities. You know what I mean? Who incidentally are here in greater proportions because in 1964 they passed something known as the Immigration Act. Prior to 1964, 90% of all people who had visas to come to the US were coming from Europe, right? Today, 90% of people who are coming here are not from Europe, right? A very diverse group of people. And that's largely the reason why you have this large population of kind of like non-Black minorities. They by and large are the major recipients, right, of these types of so-called, you know, affirmative action type policies. Again, everyone has to define what does that mean for them. What do they mean when they say kind of affirmative action? But let me be more concrete in what I'm kind of talking about. This is why, if you saw my last slide, it says minority does not mean Black, right? And we didn't talk about that. So if you got to be specific. You notice I've been saying that again and again and again and again. You got to be specific. If you say that I want to do more business with women, which I agree with 100%, and you should double, triple, quadruple down on that. And you say to yourself, you know, of the businesses with employees that are women owned, how much revenue does it drive? The answer, it drives 1.2 trillion. If you ask how much of that is coming from Black women, it's less than 2%. Right? So that means if you invest in that women program, it's not until the $99 that a sister is going to see any benefit of it. You know what I mean? So if you want to have impact on kind of Black people, you got to be specific. If you ask that same question about our Latino brothers and sisters, businesses that have employees, how much is being generated? It's $380 billion. If you ask how much of that is from Black people within that group of people, again, it's 2%. Same outcome, right? So if you invest in that, which I think you should, double, triple, quadruple down, it's not going to be until the $99 that a Black business within that framework would see any benefit. And if you say that for our Asian brothers and sisters, by definition, there's no Black people there, but they generate about $628 billion worth. If I add up all of that, white women, Asian, the whole minority category, only 4% of that is Black. All of that is inclusive and diverse spend that might be termed as, you know, affirmative action. I don't know in terms of how people might characterize it. But what I'm telling you, across the entire category, Only 4% of that is going to Black business. So you can have really great general programs that are for minorities and women inclusive and all this kind of stuff, but it can have little to no impact, right, to Black enterprise specifically. Again, I want everybody to win, but we can't assume somebody else's win and then attribute it to Black people where Black people see no economic benefit. It doesn't even make any sense. And that's why it's so important to have a command of the data. So that proposition, they would have to define what they mean by affirmative action so I could understand it. I would need to get a sense of what is that going to mean in terms of creating jobs, business, and capital in the Black community, because these programs generally are very stimulative to other communities and not to the Black community. That's just empirical fact. You can see that in the data, right? And then it winds up being kind of unhelpful for families and communities, right? So, and if that's going to be the case, then okay, people can choose to do that, but don't do that and then accredit it to Black people as a win.
Hey, Shawn, you know, I was thinking about that question the young lady asked about affirmative action, and was it advantageous to bring it back? And then I'm thinking, well, we back to that vision again. Could it be used to get better? Yeah, we go into it with the consciousness that I'm gonna use this to make it a stepping stone. It's like there's been a battle on the front line about minimum wage, and I often ask myself, what it is unless you plan on staying there, right? Because, and I say that to say this, that if they bring affirmative action back, if you use it so you can participate in PhD, then yeah, right? If somebody's gonna do something to put some coins in our hand and we got the mindset that we're gonna multiply it, then I say yeah. The problem is, I think that a lot of us see it as a solve all problems deal, and I know that's not what it is. Just like getting a job at minimum wage, the most it can do, you know, you have someone who will take a job at McDonald's, you got people there because that's the best they can do. You got people there because they're going to night school, working on their associate degree to get their advanced degree to become a doctor. So it's all about, again, what the vision is, right? And as you go, because again, one man, you know, two people can look at one thing and see two different things. It's just the reality of life, right? What do you see? Yeah. You look at that stone, you see an old dirty rock, but if you got some information, you realize that really a diamond in the rough. Right. So yeah, it's just about what the vision you take to the deal.
Yeah, I you know, it all depends on what a person's ideology is and what it is that they believe. The background ideology is that people don't like to talk about is that people think Black people are less capable.
Yes.
And because they think that, which is the 900-pound elephant in the room, you know what I mean? They can handle Black people in low doses, which is why you see the 2%, right? And if you think Black people are less capable, and if you believe that this is a zero-sum game, which means my gain is your loss, and that's what people have been taught, then it starts to feel like the higher the representation of Black people, it is somehow a higher level of injustice. Because there's more and more capable people who should have otherwise been there, and you're kind of taking their jobs and all this kind of stuff. And that's something that needs to be acknowledged and discussed, because it's not true, right? The data is actually quite empirical. The more so-called diversity that you have, the higher performing the firm is, right? Now, normal economic theory backs that up. Discrimination reduces shareholder capital, it reduces commerce, it's bad for business in every way, shape, or form, right? It's not new. It's supported by Nobel Prize winners. When people perform better because they have so-called diverse representation, it's because they have included the brilliance of formerly excluded populations. It's a really good thing.
That's right.
For performance. And that certainly will be the case with Black people, and it's certainly the case with other groups, right? As those groups are able to participate. But at the end of the day, you have something known as anti-Black bias, which we haven't talked about, which exists outside of the Black community and inside the Black community, and it's on Black community. You know what I mean? So, and how does that rear its head from an economic perspective? You know, and that's what the first part of the book is really all about. And the idea of an affirmative action may be put in place to counteract the fact that you have an anti-Black bias, which is an irrational position to take, right? By the way. So You know, it's a, I think it's one of many things that needs to be considered. There's a whole plan that's multiple parts that we need to put in place, right?
So, go
I,
ahead, Bob.
I was going to say, Sean, that yeah, and I have the same perspective on affirmative action, where I lived through it and I saw the benefit of utilizing the affirmative action because we come out of high school in 1973, went to college in the mid 70s. Corporations opened their doors to minority applicants and utilized the fundamental premise of affirmative action, but it wasn't beneficial to the Black community. It was beneficial from what I saw more to white women and foreigners, which they grouped into that, but it's a crutch that corporations can use to give the impression that, oh yeah, I'm moving more towards diversity. And about your comment about diversity being positively impactful on a business, before I started working at Mattel, they made only one Black Barbie doll in a minimal amount of quantity percentage. The one thing I can say, hang my hat on from living there, because somebody had to had the inclination to put me in the room, is that I started the conversation that, you know what, you have a 13.2% of the population is Black, and they have children that want to play with these Barbie dolls, and they don't, their parents, their mothers and fathers want them to play with dolls that look like them. And you know what? We're missing a outrageous opportunity by not offering a product that 13.2% of the population is looking for. And I told them, I says, hey, it's, until you put somebody different in the room that can bring those type of conversations to the surface, they'll never happen. And we moved from Black dolls to the Hispanic population was growing, and we had the same conversation. They're saying that the Hispanic population is the fastest growing segment of society in this country. And if we at Mattel don't recognize that and and take actionable positions to garner that business, somebody else will. So with somebody putting me in the room to have that conversation, you know what, it benefited them immensely in making a lot of money. And evidently before I got there, it wasn't even a topic of conversation.
Right. So again, discrimination cost them money.
Yes.
But they never went back and calculated how much they had lost up until that point. I mean, it's a well-known economic principle that they don't include because their ideology is flawed.
Right.
Right. And that's not what gets discussed. Now, you can convince them there's an opportunity for them to make more money, which is great, but they should apply PhD while they're making more money. You know what I mean? Because you actually strengthen the community who's now a better consumer.
Yeah.
Right. And that's part of what people need to understand. I mean, I just had a talk with a business forum, and their leadership was like, wow, like, we didn't think about it in terms of the pie is bigger. Like the pie is bigger.
Yeah.
We need to be on top of this thing because, the pie is bigger. Yeah, there is more in there for you, right? There's actually more in there for all of us. This is anathema to creating capital expansion, right? And I understand why. I understand the history behind it, but you know what I mean? It's part of the education that needs to happen. And you got to arm yourself with this information. Like we all have to, right? Like I did the work to short circuit the system, read it, internalize it, put it into place, right? These young people on the phone and other places and their networks are going to change the world. Now you can change it in a very different way. You can hyper accelerate advancement within our ecosystem,
Well, it took me 67 years to get where I am today. And what I see in the potential of these young people is that if we can give them this information, you know what, they are so far ahead of the game than where we was that it's ridiculous. And the potential of where they can go is unlimited.
I believe it 100%.
All right. Everett. Is Everett still with us?
He went off to that meeting at 1 o'clock, so I don't know, or 2 o'clock.
Okay. Well, October, what you think? Maybe
I think I saw October sign off. Daniel is still on, I think.
Okay.
And Mr. Glenn, and Mr. Glenn just got back on the call as well.
Oh, he just, okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
Everett,
he was over there.
close us out.
He was fishing for dollars. So we had a grant organization, the Munzer Foundation. One of their program people was, we did like a site visit that they usually do in person, that because of COVID has to be virtual. And so part of it was her sitting in, just hearing how we deal with the boys, and then we go out and then they ask us the tough questions about the dollars and cents and that sort of thing. So yeah, so I mean, they've given us about $100,000. So now we're trying to take it to the next level. Like we're trying to take the program to the next level. So we're trying to take their giving to the next level. And so this was
Gotta
great.
use that PhD.
Yeah, you're right,
That's right.
Daniel.
That's what I'm talking about.
So this is great, man. Who all is on this call now? Let's check before I start talking. Is it just us that I can see, like Bobby and Jordan, or?
I think Wade is on here too.
Wade just joined. Yeah, Wade just joined in.
Oh, okay. There's a whole bunch of us, the kids, still on here though, too.
Oh yeah, you know it's some that won't leave.
Oh, they won't leave.
Well, let me tell you why. Because they realize, as Shawn have, the real meeting is before the meeting and after the meeting.
Well, yeah, no. So what we talked about today was, God, you can't even plan this stuff, Shawn, the way it worked, right? Because one of the points we've been on a lot of Zooms recently with folks talking about nonprofit stuff, right? And this is donor advised funds where you get billionaires and millionaires and they donate money to a fund, but by law they only have to distribute 5% of that money. But the donor gets the full tax write-off. And so like Mark Stevens, who was with us, who's made the billionaire player, so he put $500 million over there, but they're only giving out 5% of that money, and the rest of it continues to grow and replace the money that he just gave out.
And he gets to write off for the whole thing.
Yes.
Yep.
Oh, wow.
So there's a movement to try to make them distribute more money. But one of the things they did in guys in terms of research that Mr. Rochester talked about, do this research and you examine, so they've examined the giving that has occurred by foundations post-COVID. And most of that money has gone to like frontline stuff. But when we get to education, the giving has actually decreased. So for programs like what we're doing, they're giving less money post-COVID, and partly rightfully so, because people have some immediate needs. Like I have to eat today, I have to sleep today, and under a roof. But they're doing that to the exclusion of these kids, these guys we got on this call who trying to build a future. Gabe, what you doing with a mask on? Gabriel.
Being safe. Being safe.
But yeah, so we were able to tie what you said, because you took us from, I swear to God, you took us from slavery, Shawn, all the way up to today, and you told her how they have treated us, intentionally.
Yep.
And we went into a breakout room and asked her to do better, and do different. So you set the stage. I didn't know it was gonna work like that, but it worked perfect.
Yeah, I mean, what I like is when I leave the room, business gets done. That's the whole point.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I think that what people do is they give $1,000 to $1 million problems, $1 million to $1 billion problems.
Yeah.
Right? You off by 3 orders of magnitude. Like the order that we're talking about here is massive in terms of what was done, and it's going to require a hell of a lot more to be able to course correct, and people need to invest accordingly.
Yeah, I mean, so she even asked the question about like Zoom fatigue and how I said, we had 75 guys on this call on the Saturday morning, and we got another call at night with our hackers, right? So they get on there if you're talking about something, but if you just trying to get them to memorize something, they don't even need to get on the Zoom to memorize. You just give them what you want them to memorize, right? but we having conversation and talking, and so they don't run from that. What's going on, Ms. Thurman? Is that Erica and Kobe are with us?
That's right. We're here.
All right, good to see you.
Thank you.
But yeah, so that was good. It worked perfect. So I don't want to. Just wanted to report back to you where we were at. We had this site visit, and look, we're going to get some more funding for the program, and in part due to the fact that you guys showed up today, and we appreciate that.
Amen.
The highest, I think we had almost 80 guys.
Amen.
Well, Everett, we've had guests on here for weeks and weeks and weeks, and they tell their story, but Shawn has put this whole thing in a quantitative perspective, you know, of what it actually cost us.
That's right.
And when you start talking about dollars and cents, you get a lot of people's attention.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what Shawn has brought to the surface with this Zoom participation today, and it has been just phenomenally valuable. And and like I said, this is coming from an old head, and I know if some of those young guys have any level of vision in them, they'll utilize the information that Shawn has brought to the table, and will have a resource to refer back to when they receive the books. That hey, it's going to put them on a road to accomplishing whatever objective and goals that they may have. Understanding that there's going to be pitfalls and minefields that's systematically been put in front of them to keep them from getting there. And Shawn, I just personally want to tell you, hey, you know what? You have been a wealth of information and knowledge in what you've brought to this meeting today, man, for all of us, old and young.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You mentioned it earlier, Shawn. Half this problem, though some of it is conscious, a lot of it is that their paradigm is all messed up, right?
Yep.
But what this book is doing is this: it's verifying history. Every great significant breakthrough in history, be it medicine, business, or whatever, has been a break with thinking, right?
Yep.
And so we broke off because that shift is coming, right? And then another thing. One reason all these billionaires is pledging half their money, because that another birth gift is conscience, right? And that conscience is eating at them somewhat, right? And so here's an opportunity now, because remember I said before, that's a birth gift, but your conscience tells you what's right, but it also prompts you to do that, because a lot of us know what's right, but we don't do it because our conscience says, that's all right, we don't do it, right? So I think that, and I hope you realize that, hey, helping make this shift is going to be huge, because folks now, once they hear this story, and the greed factor too, oh man, I ain't collecting all my money, because see, this could have a great effect on Wall Street, right? Because these folks looking and say, wait, we're not tapping all the resources, we're not maximizing our ability, because we're excluding these people. And not only are you losing because you're not including our folks, but also, what about the synergistic piece? See, you can't add that up on paper. That when you start to bring some of these folks to the table, 1 and 1 is no longer 2, it's 6 and 7.
Yeah, I mean that's the point, to let people know, like, the pie's bigger. You know what I mean? It's not a fantasy. It's not a cliche. It actually really is. You're losing money, and it's demonstrably so. There's brilliance in these populations, man. Like, no matter where you are, if you think in Ferguson or South Side of Chicago or Crenshaw, it doesn't matter. there's brilliance in these populations. These young people are just not getting the opportunity to have it develop, and they're not getting the opportunity to have it deployed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's great for them and their families and communities. And it's also great for the whole ecosystem. And we have to have, you know, more people who know that. And then when they do, give them the path to direct their efforts and their resources. So the money should go here and it should have this effect. We should think about this and we should think about it that way. There's a difference between a cost and an investment, right? When it comes to our young people, you know what I mean? Let's focus on making this pie actually as big as possible. And then we need to incent them and disincent them. There should be some rewards for doing that, and there should be some consequences, right, for not doing it, and address some of these ideologies, right? Not all people are coming from the same place, right? Biases do exist, and they do have, you know, economic impact, and we can't afford that, right? We can't afford it as a people, certainly as individuals, and we can't afford it as a country. I think more people you get on board with that, now you really start to see some impacts. You know what I mean? And this is a long-term play. This isn't like, okay, we do this one thing tomorrow and we're kind of done, right? This is what we're going to do over the next 50 years to be able to fill some of these gaps in a significant, you know, and profound way. Other real quick thing on the CPR for the soul, right? Like, it's also very, very powerful in terms of how you manage your money. It will help young people, anybody really. I wrote it for our community, but it helps anybody. It'll help you avoid $1 million mistake. Like, if you go through this gauntlet to finally get to university and finally make it through and to do well, and then you start in life, everybody's figuring it out, right? And in the process of figuring it out, we're leaving a lot on the table. We're not invested in these tax-deferred savings plans, right? We're spending more time trying to shine than we are trying to really build. You know what I mean? We're losing opportunities. And then we all kind of come to Jesus around 35, right? Now you want to get married, you want to go back to church, you want to tithe, you want to help the community, you want to do it all, right? Like, but you lost 14 years. If you run the math in your own home, that's $1 million on the table. I'm not leaving nothing on the table, right? Particularly in an environment, right, where people are happy for you to kind of, you may not be able to control your oppression, but you should never subsidize it. Don't make it cheaper.
Absolutely.
Right? So
I just tell them, just like compounded interest, it's not how much you put in, it's the amount that occur over time.
Right. Right.
100%. It's time. It's time. That's it.
So Everett, I assume Shawn would agree with us then. One of the things we share with the young guys is this, Shawn. You work on your business, you can make a living, but if you work on yourself, you can make a fortune.
There you go. You need it. Right. And by the way, we didn't even talk about, I didn't even mention the importance of choosing the right mate.
The who? Wait a minute, hold up. The who?
Of choosing the right mate.
Hey, Everett, he got all to the notes.
I didn't even go there. Right?
I gotta get my notebook.
We gotta bring you back, man. Hey, watch this. He talking that who piece again.
Yes, it is.
We didn't tell him to say that. That's that who piece. Shawn, just real briefly, just deal with how important that mate, which is a who, how important that is.
Oh man. So if we just focus on, let's just talk about the pure financial aspects of what you as an individual are doing, right? And let's say that you read the CPR stuff, you get it, you love it, you know, you put it in place. If you have a significant other, it doesn't matter if you know it yourself, right? You have to have that person rowing in the same direction with you.
That's right.
You have to have similar value systems, right? You have to examine like your relationship with money and their relationship with money, particularly in your youth. Some people's association with love and value is the spending of money. You know what I'm saying? Right. And that if you have a person who values that, that's how they feel good about themselves. That's how they fill the gaps that were created as they kind of grow up. Then you have to allocate resources to do that, which means you're not allocating it to maximize your ownership of your own assets. You're not maximizing your free cash flow and that of your family unit. You're not maximizing your ability to leave legacy. You know what I mean? It's like another hole in the ship. And you could fill that ship as much as you want, but you have this massive leakage and outflow. You can't, it's very hard to out earn a spendthrift, right? And by the way, you might be the spendthrift, right? And they might be the person who's really focused on stewardship, ownership, and legacy. That the mate that you choose is critical to your ability to actually build the platforms, because when you go through the tough times and you're trying to invest in your vision, you may not have enough resources, right? They're the ones who are filling the gap for that period of time so that you can actually get to the 10, 20x multiplier, right? Effect. They're the ones who are kind of breathing into you that you should continue to believe in yourself and in your vision, as opposed to speaking negativity into you, right? When you're trying to do it. And a lot of people in that situation it's really, really tough. It's like the difference between having a jetpack on your back and having some bricks, right, on your back, right? When you're in a race. And I'm not being hyperbolic. Like you,
So why just the old guys laughing?
Who you choose for that journey is super, super critical, right? And I think it's a really, really, really important thing that has to be put in place. And then you have to be able to balance it, because if you achieve wealth at a rapid rate, and God willing that that's the case, that kind of bends the trajectory of the lens of how people see you.
Yeah.
Right. And now, that can have an impact on your relationship, and you're trying to figure and think through that. So your mate, your partner, right, whoever you choose for this life journey or portion of that journey, is super critical. It has everything to do with your ability to succeed to the fullness that you should be able to succeed. Take it extremely seriously.
You're
right.
You're
right. On here.
You're right, Shawn. I got one that's on the 47-year trip, and I couldn't
You're verified heir.
I couldn't wait a minute. I couldn't have began to do what I do now. I sit back and revisit the journey that without her, because she had to make decisions in my absence when I was out trying to accomplish the goals that we set. And without the right one, you're right. It can all be blown up easily.
Amen. And God bless you. And what I would say this is, like, if you like you, if you believe in you, it will inform who you choose.
That's right.
If you do not believe in you, you will make yourself open to all kinds of profoundly bad choices, right? So you need to love you first, because it's hard to love others if you don't love yourself. The commandment is making the association between the love of self before others. You got to like you, man. Like I like me. You know what I mean? Like I actually like me. You know what I mean? And I'm gonna bet on me, and I'm gonna claim that I can do great things, and I'm just gonna go work my hardest to be able to do it. Right. And I want you guys to do the same thing. I want you to like you, no matter what anybody says, no matter what they say about complexion, nose, hair, dress, anything. You really have to love and believe in yourself, so that you can fill those gaps. You know what I mean? And I believe in you, but it's more important that you do.
Right.
Yeah. See.
And you answered the $1 million question, Shawn, that these youngsters, because I bet we haven't asked them, but I bet a lot of them would buy into what they read and hear other people say, like, we're in our position, it's our fault. We did this to ourselves. We stupid. We don't work hard. All these stereotypes they've heard, and now they have heard this has been intentional and systematic, right? From the very start. And so there's no, in fact, you should be surprised we have done as much as we've done.
Exactly.
In spite of every time you turn around.
Yep.
Yeah.
100%, so like even with our little ones, I'm well, not so little anymore, like, they're getting the treatment, right? Because they're under the roof.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Right. Yep. But it's like I was at this thing where I'm like, You know, do you love this? Because I, you know, like, you gotta love you. Like, you know what I mean? Because people can be mean and they can be heartless, and they could feel better about themselves by making you feel worse about yourself. Like,
That's right.
that's a natural thing that folks tend to do, which I don't
That's
think is
right.
healthy. And
That's
and
right.
you got to be able to get through that period, right? So
Yeah.
that building that love of self is important. Like, say it, then go do it. Some people
Absolutely.
say it, but they don't do nothing.
Hey,
Like,
my,
I say it, then I.
Barley's, he talked to the kids, the former NFL player from Compton, who then went to Columbia, and he told the kids that his grandmother made him tell her 3 things that he liked about himself.
Yep.
3 things he had to articulate. 3 things. So he said, "I'm funny, you know, I'm smart, and I'm whatever." So whenever anybody would say anything different than that, he knew there was 3 things he liked about himself.
That's exactly right. It's
Your point that
critical.
people have a way of making you feel bad.
If you love you and you feel that you have a purpose, you're going to choose your mate accordingly.
Yes.
Period. End of story.
Yes.
That's why I'm talking about it, right?
I agree.
You know what I mean? So it's a really important thing to do, and it's a country where you get 1,000 messages a day that are contrary to what you believe about yourself. It's telling you not to love yourself, not to value yourself, to operate in these ways that are consistent with other people's belief system. I reject all of that. You know, like when I first came to this country from someplace else, the first thing they did was they put me in remedial classes. They didn't ask no question.
Hey, how about the basement?
The first thing they did, and by the way, I always been I'm a straight savage, right?
Hey, Shawn, listen, man. Mr. Franklin and I, we went to middle school and high school together, but they threw us in a basement for 3 years without no chairs, no doors, no nothing. We were so dumb then, though. Maybe they was right, because we wasn't even knowing we was being programmed, right? And it's funny, but even with all that, we're here today. And when you talked earlier about how the folks that got together and say we need to educate these workers so they can be better craftsmen, but you also commented about they had another part of that education which would make us always be all right with being inferior. And I know we probably don't have enough time today, but we need to get in the back so we can talk about that part right there. He obviously he didn't buy that. He didn't buy that part.
Nope.
He didn't buy that part. See,
nope.
A lot of us did. Yeah. And we need to talk about that part, because what did they do to make us be better over here, but make us feel it's all right to be inferior? And Shawn, we're gonna ask you to come back, man, because we got to talk about that.
All right, I'm in.
Okay, my man.
All right, well, let's throw out 45. It's 45 minutes longer than we said.
We always do.
We're down to 23, so we're gonna call it a wrap. Since we got to do this again at 7 o'clock.
Excuse me.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I just wanted to say thank you, because I knew about like that back then the other people, like our Black people, were put underground and they got less things that we did now, but I didn't know that like they put people put people in basements for school, and they made
yes, they did.
Hey,
and they did this bad stuff. I knew they were bad, but I didn't know it was this bad.
They still doing it. They just don't change the building. That's all.
I appreciate that, Lance. I like that. Stepping up. He's saying, wait. Don't end the show. I got something to say. I love it.
Hold on.
Now, Lance, you're new to the program. What grade are you in?
Fourth.
Wow.
4th grade.
Yeah. So if you understand anything that we talking about, you're gonna be.
Yeah. See that put a smile on Shawn's face, because he know that might be the next Malcolm right there. You gotta get that autograph.
Well, Shawn, I hope you can find it in your schedule to get back soon, man. I tell you.
Yeah.
And I know you've left a lot on the table, because they always say if you've left a meeting or left a situation and you don't have nothing left, then that means you haven't done your job. There's always something you can come back.
You didn't have nothing.
Right. So just to we tap your area where you didn't even wasn't even going to talk about, and that's about
that's
selecting the right
that's
mate.
the piece we was waiting on. Because, hey, Shawn, watch this. We teach the kids that no matter what happens to you, that don't determine your future. It's what you do about what happens. So now we ready to go to work. So you got to come back.
No. This is not kind of empty talk. Yeah, let's just work it out, schedule it, right? Let's make it happen. I'm in.
Yeah, we got to talk about that piece then.
Okay. We're gonna do it for the next site visit with the grantor, because after they hear what you say.
Yeah. Yeah, they might say give them all the money. just give all of it to it, so we can get, maybe we can get into heaven. That's enough to buy heaven.
Because she looked sad when we started to meet. We went to the breakout like you had broken down.
They about to give us all the money. Here, you take all the billions. Make sure you let Jesus know it.
I hear that.
Well, Shawn, I know you do a lot of these things, so hopefully you've seen what we're trying to do over here in the Boss program, and hopefully you can understand the value of what you can bring to the table to help us move this process along with these young people. And like I said, you're a godsend, man.
Thank you guys for having me on the program, for indulging, for staying on as long as everyone stayed on. You know what I mean? I thoroughly enjoyed it. I love talking to young people. I love talking to my people. You know what I mean? And I'm game to do it again. Like there's a journey that we're on, right?
Yeah.
By the way, there's lots we can talk about.
Share with you guys that Donovan, who's in the program, Donovan Pitts, and his dad, Ivan Pitts, they from Connecticut, so they used to work with Shawn, one of our kids in the program. So when I get back to the kids, they said, "Who's gonna be coming, Shawn Rochester?" That's a small world, like you say, Bishop, about attracting. Being recruited, attracting.
Yeah, Ivan is one of my great friends, and he used to be our pastor out here, and he's just a phenomenal, amazing, just wonderful person who we miss dearly.
Yeah,
part of Connecticut are you in?
So we live in a small town called Southbury, but when they were here, we lived in a town called Danbury, about 20 minutes east of here.
Okay, how far is that from Yale? You're in Connecticut, right?
Where I'm at right now is probably 45 minutes from Yale.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So you hang out with George Bush, and Miss Clinton, all of them from up that way.
Yeah, I haven't gotten a hold of those folks yet, right?
Yeah.
If I get a chance to talk to them, it's going to be PhD all day, every day.
All day long. All day long. All right, man.
All right, gentlemen.
All right.
We talk.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rochester.
Thank you. See you next Boss Talk.
Thank you.
Yeah, man. Come on. See, that's good, man. Absolutely.
My man.
Who's my friend?
Yes, sir.
RJ, way to show up. RJ had practice. He came after practice.
That's right. That's what he's supposed to do.
Yeah.
Because watch this, it took that whole thing to get down where we wanted to go. See, that's the piece that lit him up, because that's what we want him. What's the real deal? How you do that? See, because at the end of the day, all them facts, we end up saying that's messed up. But we teaching them, that's where we starting from. It's messed up. Now what we gonna do? That's why I'm saying come on back, because more important is how did you get through where you at? That's what we want. See, because these kids need solutions, man, because it's just what it is. See, you know, I was talking to somebody the other day, Bobby maybe, and I asked him, I said, you know what this deal is? It's just like eating an elephant. And you know, how do you eat an elephant? And people say, I don't know. Well, one bite at a time, one boss guy at a time. See, that's how we gonna do this deal, right? Wow. But isn't it funny, at the end of the day, it's that same stuff. See, how you write that book? Man, I paid the price. I had vision. I saw it. That's what we want the guys to understand. You got to see, you got to close your eyes to see what you want. Don't let anybody tell you. If you can see it and you can imagine it, you can achieve it, right?
But Gabriel has closed his eyes, so he did that part.
Yeah. Oh, did he? Oh, yeah. Okay. Okay. Gabriel, hey, listen, he got them strobe lights going in the background. He might have a day. What he doing? Oh, he got it going on. So yeah, Everett, let me ask you this, man. Well, I'll talk to you later after we get off the call about something.
Yeah. Okay. Isaiah, way to show up, man. Isaiah, way to show up.
All right. Thank you. See you next boss. See you next call.
And Bobby, way to show up, Bobby.
Hey.
Was that Shane or Brandon? They're going off for the Rita. That's Shane or Brandon. Way to show up, guys. Yeah, we're gonna just shut it down, man, because y'all ain't gonna leave. We just said leave 4 times.
Yeah, no. See, some of them ain't going. They don't figured it out. Because if you left early today, you missed it.
Yeah.
Oh, Everett, this man gave us 3 hours.
Oh yeah. With 9:30, with 10 is almost 1. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and here we go. Every time you say, "Can it get any better?" And at the end of the day, like you said, I'm in. Yeah. I mean, that's all you need to hear is that hey, extend the opportunity. Can we get you back? Hey, I'm in. This is I can see the value in what's going on.
But watch this. Did you see how he lit up when we went inside? Okay, how you do this? See, because you see, he went to a whole nother level when he started talking about, hey, listen, I'm the best at this, because it's that inspiration, it's that passion that I was hoping that we could draw out of him, and at the end of the day, he boss, right?
It came, yeah.
Yeah, I don't care what they doing. I'm gonna still be on top. I'm gonna dominate no matter what, and that's the attitude of boss, right? I don't care what the numbers say. It ain't gonna apply to me, right? And that's what most important. But I understand too.
But at the end of your statement, Marvin, it ain't gonna apply to me because
right.
Because I've done this and I've done this.
And that's the piece. That's the piece why we want him coming back, because so the kids can hear at the end of the day, it's that going the extra mile, paying the price. See what I'm saying? The set of the sale. See what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Because, now watch this. Can't you tell that he was unconsciously confident about this stuff? See, he done went through the whole process of learning it, right? He know he good. See, and so I see that was what I was looking for, because we're about solutions here, man. Spiritually, they say this. Everything is a vibration, even the chair we sit in. But the vibration of the problem is totally different from the vibration of the solution. So I'm trying to tune into the solutions because it is messed up, right? And most of us, Bobby, Wade, and you, we don't know. We, like my man said, we in the fourth quarter and they got the ball. So we got to make sure we lead this with them, because somebody gonna come down the pike and tell them we was crazy. Yeah. You're wasting your time, that you can't do that. Or they'll look at the statistics and determine who and what they can be. And so no, man, again, the vision, man. The vision says you see the potential. To put balls together, you had to look inside this. I heard a statement earlier from Shawn. This is a different group of guys that was, no, these was just some regular guys that some ordinary guys that want to do some extraordinary things. See, we all just regular people. Bob said, listen, he come from a single mom, 8 siblings. That ain't like he came from Crown Heights nowhere, right? Yeah. Just then you come from the projects. Come on, myself. And that's what people gotta understand. Yeah, we're something different now, but that ain't how it started. And what got Bob from where he come from, or you from the projects, the same thing's gonna take these young guys. But they watch this. We were way up in the game by the time we started putting some of it together. These, like I said, we got a guy out here in the 4th grade. Yeah. My only thing in the 4th grade was, how could I get that nickel to buy that blow pop at the next desk?
Hey, did you see how he spoke up to say, hey, don't let that meeting in?
I got something to say.
Yeah, right, don't let that meeting in with a. I didn't know that. I they talk about slavery in the old day. I didn't know they put guys in the basement.
Yeah,
hey.
Yeah. Hey, come on.
I knew it was bad. I didn't know it was that bad.
Right.
Hey, I wish we had. They don't tore the school down. I wish we had some pictures.
Yeah.
The sad part about it, remember when Shawn said they had the education to make you better in your craft, but they also had a separate education to make you accept the mediocrity as far as being all right with getting menial jobs. That's what that basement probably was about. You know what I mean? It was preparing us to don't even strive to be much, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of people bought that program, man.
Well, we were only in the 6th grade. How was we to know? I mean, we're impressionable young men, young boys. We ain't even men, young boys. And somebody systematically made a decision about the future of a few hundred Black boys, and that future was nothing more than being in a subservient position for the rest of their life.
Hey, I can imagine when they was having teacher meetings, what they doing down there, man? They doing the same old thing. That's why we got them down there. So that's good, man. Wow.
Yeah.
All right, Everett.
All right, we talk to you guys.
All right, Everett.
All right, Bob. Hey, Wade, I don't know where you are, but I know you're out there somewhere. Down low. Huh?
Is that him on D phone?
I don't know.
I'm talking about Wade. He's somewhere.
His name popped in, but he never said anything.
Oh, football season will start it now, man. You know, he probably had a game somewhere in the president's booth.
All right. Talk to you guys later.
Okay. Talk to you.